I'm Brent Leary.
I'm Paul Greenberg.
It just feels a little weird saying it at 1:30 instead of 3 o'clock.
Well, you know that old saying, it's 5 o'clock somewhere?
So it's 3 o'clock
Uh,
somewhere.
well, probably in Newfoundland. Actually, it's exactly 3 o'clock in Newfoundland. They're an hour and a
Well, there
half
it
ahead of
is.
us. Yeah. So this is live from St. John's, Newfoundland.
Yeah, that. We are the CRM Playaz. And yes, the first one of the year. We have gone this long without doing an executive roundtable for 2022.
You want to know something? We literally hit the deadline for the first quarter. That's
This is
today. Tomorrow is the second quarter.
perfect planning there, folks.
Yeah, beautiful. So tomorrow
Defender is the first.
right. And well, here's the thing. The second one will be tomorrow.
Wow. All right, that's true. Wow. Okay. So Gurvinder gets the first comment of the day. We're looking forward to it. Too. I'm glad you're looking forward to it. Yeah.
How you doing, my friend? Those of you who don't know Gurvinder, he is one of the leaders in North America of Wipro, and he's a brilliant guy.
And
then, of course,
guest.
Ratul is actually a leader at SAP, but we know him as the guy who ate the hottest wings ever and actually didn't survive.
Yeah. Wait a minute, he didn't?
No.
That's kind of awkward.
I'm so sorry to tell you that.
Now, we can't do a CRM Playaz show of any kind until we hear from Sven. I don't know what the heck language that is this time.
I'm guessing Finnish, maybe? But there's no
wait a minute. Sven is speaking Finnish. Is that what you're telling me?
Well, I'm wondering if that's Finnish. I don't know. See, the problem is Finnish has a lot of those accents above, but you can't reproduce them in this.
Ratul has already shown the appreciation there.
He knows.
Don't know who this is, but hello back to you. All right, I'm gonna have to get one more in because we got to get going.
My buddy. So Cahill is I don't know what time it is in India, but it's absolutely unconscionable that he's awake, whatever time it is.
Okay,
then get some sleep, but thank you, Sahil. Javanese.
Speaking Javanese. Whoa. Okay,
that's one of the many languages of Indonesia, by the way.
You had me at one. So anyway, folks, we're really happy to have you. Excited. First CRM Playaz Executive Roundtable of the year. And of course, I don't think there's a hotter topic in the industry than CDPs. So we thought we should do the first one on that. Right? Is that the logic we used? Or
it was something like that. Plus, there's a comment there toward the bottom. You really do that says, I feel like I had to be here. You should probably bring that up because it was his idea. We have to give him credit. He sparked it.
Digital pestilence was the inspiration for this show.
That's right.
So yes, we need to give.
By the way, not an insult to all the panelists. It's not really an insult. The digital pestilence sparked it. That's his nickname, right?
Yeah, that's the.
It's not a condition. It's not a condition. It's his nickname.
Yes. Thank you, sir, and glad to see that you're moving around a little bit better now. Okay. All right, so we have a lot ahead of us. We have got a great panel of leaders, industry experts, C-level, thought levelship. Yeah, thought levelship. Got a lot of thought levelship going on. Anyway,
right. We're going to lead her up.
We have a panel. We're going to introduce you to them in a second. That'll go on for about 75, 90 minutes, thereabouts. After the panel, we'll have some, what do we call it? The post-game analysis. We have a couple of different rapid rounds of folks that are going to be helping us out. And I don't want to spend much more time. I got to go out and get those speaking lessons.
I don't want to spend much more time on figuring out what I'm going to say.
Yeah, right. So if you don't have anything else, I'll start the the show
No,
off.
I'm ready to roll. Are you kidding? I'm very excited about asking David Raab to ask questions for me.
Wow. Since you brought his name up,
Whoa.
how could we do a discussion on CDP and not have the person that actually coined the phrase? So, as a special CRM Players co-host for the next 90 minutes, David, now I'm going to say Rob. You're going to say Raab.
No, I'm going to say Rob because that's what
That's
it
what
was.
Anand told us, right?
Right, and I'm going to have to go. I have to go with it.
Okay. So, let's bring on the Godfather. It's so cool. I get to be able to do two Godfathers on one screen.
Yeah, but is he venerable?
No, he's
Too young.
Pretty venerable.
not quite.
Well,
More venerable than he cares to think about.
that's how I look at it. Hey,
David, thank you for joining us, man. This is great.
Always good to be here. And you got it right. It is Rob, in fact.
Rob, yeah.
Shout out to Anand Tucker for making sure we
We
said
were
that
double
right.
checking with him all the time because we don't call you Rob or Rab. We just call you David.
I say Raab. I was saying Raab until yesterday, and he never really like corrected me. He just let me.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, just don't call me late for dinner,
Oh, that's like that proves you are venerable.
Oh
That's
You
wow!
right.
made
Yeah.
that
Okay.
right. That is literally, if you know that phrase, you're venerable.
Okay. So, gonna have the panel. We're gonna introduce those folks, but I just want to tell you what happens after the panel. We have our players in residence.
PIR.
We have such a great group of folks here. Some of them are siblings. Some of them have risen to exalted status. But Rebecca Wetterman, Anand Tucker, and the one and only Bob Stutz will be joining us directly after the panel to give their thoughts on some of the things that they'll hear and we'll talk about and discuss. So you got to stick around for that after the panel. Then the fun doesn't stop there. We have a post-game analyst show. Actually, we had 4 folks, but unfortunately, Shelly Kramer, who's in the bottom left, had a emergency and can't make it. She's okay. She just won't be able to make it with us. But we will have David Smith, what do we call him? The bad boy of ERP?
Yeah.
Okay. John Reed, the bad boy. You can tell he's bad by the look on his
Look
face.
at that face.
I know.
Yeah.
How could he? I'm getting scared already. And then finally, or should I say, not the least, last, or what's that saying? Not the last, but the least.
Last but not least.
Yeah, that. Our buddy, Josh Greenbaum. I wonder if he's going to sing for us this. Anyway,
He might
want to
you know, and he, by the way, is getting very close to venerable.
Oh. Are you like the venerable police? Are you like looking for recruits?
Thanks to what you've done, I now am. Right?
Okay.
I'm actually working up a white paper on standards for venerableness, and then the ability to change the name to venerality.
All right. Make it up words now.
Something.
We better move on. Okay.
Yeah, quick before I turn into complete gibberish.
Last thing before we introduce the panel. Next week is going to be a special CRM Players show. Do you realize that CRM Magazine is celebrating the 25th year of them being in business this year? So next Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern, we are bringing you the folks from CRM Magazine, editors past and present, getting some good stories in about the early days of the magazine and CRM. You're going to want to be a part of that one. Well, maybe you get an apple too. I don't know.
That one's going to be amazing. We're going to reminisce, basically, right? And that will be an amazing one. Hey, by the way, can you do me a favor? We've got to answer this. Put up Josh's comment because we got to answer that. He got it wrong. No, we didn't say that. We said last but not least. Last but not least, Josh. Venerable Josh.
Yeah, maybe he is venerable. I don't know after that one. All right.
Venerated.
Let's get moving. So what we want to do is bring the folks out. We'll have them do a little self-introduction and give a little top line view that they have about where we are right now in CDP. And then the conversation goes wherever it goes. We're not sticking to any scripts. There are no scripts, very loosely structured. We just want to have a really good conversation and hear from all these folks and hear from you in the comments as well. So we all ready?
And if you do have questions, ask them in the comments.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I don't think there's any shortage of that going on already. So
no.
I think they're winding up. So why don't I do this? Why don't I bring them out one at a time, and then we'll get into it. I'm just going alphabetical order. Neha Bajwa, thank you for joining us. Neha is the head of global product marketing and solutions, customer engagement solutions for Microsoft. Thank you for making time.
Thank you so much, Brent and Paul and David, the godfathers, the two godfathers in the same room. I'm actually honored to be here with the two godfathers.
Brent's our boss, though.
Okay.
I get that. Let me just say a little bit about myself. I lead the product marketing team for Dynamics, customer engagement that includes customer data platform at Microsoft. And I think you asked us to do a little bit of the state of CDP right now. Is that correct?
Sure. Absolutely.
So I'll do my take, and I don't know, David. You should tell me if this is like correct or not. But I think CDP is a one confused data platform. It's trying to grow up, but it's so confused because people think, and there's a lot written about what is CDP and what it is not. But people do tend to get confused, and more as organizations are looking to get the 360-degree view of the customer. There's scope creep that keeps happening with customer data platform. And I actually say there's scope creep that happens on the MDM side, master data platform, trying to be a CDP. And so it'll clear up, but it is absolutely critical that there is a data structure and a database that is outcome-based and looking at customers and being able to profile the customers so that we can get more out, the business drivers, particularly on the marketing. I do think there's a lot of work happening to do it across customer experience. So sales, marketing, and service as a critical component, like CDP becomes a critical component for those increasingly. But that's my take. We need to clarify.
Sounds good. You got an amen from Alan Berkson, by the way. Totally in agreement. Okay, moving on.
Hey.
Now, this gentleman we've known going all the way back to 20 minutes ago. His name is John Baudino. He is VP of Partners and Alliances for Treasure Data. John, thanks for joining us, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I come from Treasure Data, one of the earliest independent enterprise CDPs in the market. So you're probably wondering why I was asked to join an esteemed group of heavy hitters, godfathers here, and where I lead up partnerships. Well, CDPs fit within an organization, within their existing tech stacks, working with their existing partners. And partnerships are going to be the ones that are so important of how to connect in with existing tech stacks, work with existing agencies, because really whoever controls the data and the profiles is really going to be the ones who are empowered here. And what Treasure Data is doing, and where I see is you create a platform that's going to connect the functions within an organization. And that's really critical as you have your chief data officers on the tech side, as you have the marketing teams, the analytics. They need a common tool that they can use that really bridges the gap and lets them stay away from their silos or connect their silos. And then all the partners that they're working with, be able to get them on board as well, because you're not going to rip and replace everything. You don't have enough time And we can bring quick time to value where you can see results in weeks. And I think that's what's so good about it, is the power is here. The technology is here. It's all about just getting people to understand what it is that they have and how to use it. So that's my perspective. And thank you for having me.
Hey,
Thanks, man.
hey, before we move on, I want to give a shout out to Tom Trainer, who's I think your CMO.
Yes.
He's been all over this thing. I mean, I see his name everywhere now. He's literally, I fall asleep seeing Tom Trainer's name because as soon as this was announced, I have seen him go. He does what a great CMO does, which is get the word out. And I just saw him say a legend about you. So
Yes.
there he is again.
No,
Just wanted to give him a
Tom's
shout
the
out
godfather of treasure data for sure, and beyond.
Wow. More Godfathers.
Yes,
Great.
exactly.
It's like a meeting of the families in New York City at an Italian
I'll bring my
restaurant.
Italian roots.
Right. Italian restaurant.
All right. Next up, I want to call him Don Cahill, but it's Des Cahill. You know, Don.
Does that make me a Don? Am I as a Don? Am I equivalent to a Godfather, above a
Yes.
Godfather?
One of the 5
Where
families.
am I in the Godfather hierarchy? And Brent, if you're in charge of 2 Godfathers, are you a godmother?
Okay,
No,
moving right along.
You'd have to be maybe a god grandfather.
All right. Des is Group Vice President, Product Development, Oracle Advertising, and CX. Thanks for joining us, man.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me. And hey, I want to apologize in advance if I seem distracted from time to time. I have 75 pounds of chocolate lab puppy in my office right now, chewing on cables and papers and specifications. So I'm in charge at this time, but I think she'll be okay. And I think we'll be okay.
That's no problem.
Cool.
So
So give us your opening statement on where we are with CDP coming out of this pandemic right now.
Okay, my opening statement. So I'll comment on 3 things. I think the enterprise CDP space is moving from a marketing application to an enterprise critical business application. And, I guess my 3 points underneath that is, well, we started out as a single view of the customer across marketing. And then, obviously we've heard a lot of messaging about sales and service, and you'll see an announcement from us soon around expansion into the service arena, but also finance and supply chain, right? I think the notion of, wow, we've got this single source of information around the customer, a customer master for engagement is core to the CDP, but increasingly we're also seeing our customers looking to master on product or account. So for example, if you're a retailer, you can master your CDP information, your enterprise CDP information on a retail store location to analyze shopper segmentation or same year-over-year sales assortment. Or if you're an auto manufacturer, you can master on car model to analyze service requests by model, by region. So there's a customer element in there, but you're starting to aggregate customer information in a way that informs the wider business for planning and strategy, not just in the moment engagement. And then the third piece around moving from a marketing application to a critical business application, I would say is B2b expansion. We're seeing, all of the enterprise vendors are talking about B2B or launching it. And I think a lot of the growth company or the independents are doing that as well. I think that's a more complex world because you've got consumer and you can get into household as well, modeling as well in your CDP, but you're getting into B2B with accounts, contacts, service warranties, assets, orders, overall more complex data management. So that's the first thing, moving from a marketing application to a critical business application. I think the second big thing that I see or we see is cookie deprecation is accelerating. The company need to manage first party data better, and the CDP is playing a part of that. So my first comment, I'm talking about moving away from marketing and moving across the broader organization. And my second comment, I'm saying ironically that the cookie deprecation is moving the CDP across marketing engagement and more into marketing acquisition. And as there's pressure on the cookie, it's making first party data more valuable, and the need to bring together loyalty data, product information, even back office operational information, especially in a B2B context, so that as you're cut off from a anonymized prospect information that you can develop into known party information, you're just making the best use of your known information. So I think over time we'll see a CDP category grow, especially for those firms that are concentrating on marketing, to take over some of the functionality that have traditionally been done by the DMP. And then my third comment would be on the overall market dynamics. And I don't think this is incredibly insightful, but I'll say it anyway, is, if it was a horse race in the CDP market, you'd have 3 packs. You'd have the enterprise players, Adobe, Oracle, Microsoft, and now SFDC, welcome to the party, Salesforce. And then since I saw Esteban in the comments, I think I have to say SAP as well. So there's, large players in there. And we're at various stages of product maturity and solution use case, but we are sort of making the market in terms with our brands and our marketing power. In the second pack in the horse race would be the top tier growth stage CDPs, like a treasure data. And David, you probably have the exact numbers, but I know that lots and lots of venture capital is being raised by those companies, and they're trying to compete with the enterprise and grow. And then I'd say the third pack in the horse race are the more niche growth stage independent CDPs, and I think we'll see a lot of consolidation. I've been saying this for a couple of years, but I think over the next couple of years, we'll see a lot of consolidation. I do think the CDP market, the opportunity is bright for everybody in the space. There's so many vectors to expand in terms of industries, use cases, buyer personas, again, circling back to my first comment on, moving from a marketing application to a critical business application. Obviously, the CMO is controlling the majority of the buying around the CDP, but I think we're seeing, chief digital officer, chief information officer, having a role, even the CEO having a role in considering making a strategic buy of CDP that isn't just for marketing, but it's for the business, especially as they, take the lessons of the pandemic and digital engagement. So anyway, that's a lot, but there you have it. And the dog chewed through one thing during that dive. That's so cool. Okay.
I didn't even would have known you had a dog if you hadn't said anything there, man. It was very quiet. All right, let's keep things moving along. Now I just went in alphabetical order, but it's kind of ironic that the last two guests are the last two guests because they have a little something in common here. First up, Marty Kihn. Marty is, want to make sure I get your title right, SVP Strategy, Marketing Cloud for Salesforce, and a co-author of this book on CDP, I think. Is that right?
That's right.
Thanks for joining us, man.
I am a co-author. In fact, my co-author is coming up next.
Absolutely. So give us a couple of minutes.
Yeah, sure. I'm Marty Kihn, strategy team within the Salesforce Marketing Cloud. And it is indeed an honor to be here with so many venerable godfathers, and as was said. So I joined Salesforce almost 3.5 years ago, something like that, from Gartner, where I covered CDPs, among other things. And I was an analyst, industry analyst. And so I think it's the category has matured and is maturing. It's a strange category. It was back then there were a number of startup-y type vendors who were sort of products in search of a category, in search of a MarTech category. And I would put in that category even like very interesting products like Treasure Data or Lytics or Agile One. And they kept changing their names, but they were essentially, and Particle even, they were essentially CDPs before there was CDP. And I know David invented the term in 2013, but it wasn't until about 2016, 2017 that people became aware, in a mass sense, aware of this category. And I think since then, it's come a long way. Back then, the most common question we got in 2018 was, what is this thing called a CDP? And I even wrote an article on Ad Exchanger with that title, what is this thing? What does it do? I think that the requests came from marketing, and in particular in retail in the beginning. And the reason was because marketers had a couple of cookie deprecations, obviously one of them, the rising importance of first-party data, rise of regulations, not just in Europe, but also North America. So a need to consent data, so to attach consent metadata on top of the profile. So marketers got this sort of sense of panic that they needed to get their data act in order, or their competitors would move on ahead without them. And the other thing is that just the way marketing develops is marketers need to react to consumer behavior, and consumer behavior is impossible to predict. People, you can't tell what they're going to do. It's like, who predicted influencer marketing? Who predicted social? I mean, we think we know in retrospect, but nobody predicted social be so big, or the iPhone. Who predicted that? So marketers have to spin up a mobile team and a mobile analytics team and the social team, social analytics, and they all have their own applications. And 2 or 3 years ago, they all realized, hey, I've got a lot of customer data about the same person, and it's sitting in 25, 30 different applications. So there was, I really think it was sort of this moment of let's get our act in order. And it came, a lot of it, from retailers who were competing with Amazon and wanted to be able to do a creditable job. Now, since then, where we're going is, I think that it's matured as a category. It's matured to the point where, even though there are 140 or however many, David can tell you, CDPs, they're using the principle that David Ricardo, not Ricky Ricardo, David Ricardo, the economist, the comparative advantage, which is CDPs are focusing on what they do best. And I agree with what Des said from Oracle. Salesforce, we deal with large enterprises, they have complex problems, and they want a solution that can apply across the enterprise. So at least our CDP approach is not marketing specific, and it was never intended to be marketing specific. Anyone who deals with the customer should have access to the customer profile data. It's sort of logical. Service is obvious, but what about commerce and so on? So that's one thing. And the second thing is that I think the buyers have become more sophisticated too, in the sense that they are realizing that they already have some kind of solution in place. Many of them have built something. And so when they're looking at a CDP, they're trying to look at what can complement what I already have that's already working. So there's a more sophisticated and nuanced approach to the RFPs that we see and sort of the discussions. And it's not really get me the CDP to solve all my problems, because I don't know about these other guys, but our CDP doesn't solve every single problem in the world. But it's I think it's good in a way, but it's still sort of, I don't know, inning 2 or 3 in the ball game. So we're still, I would say, in the early stages of CDP.
All right.
All right,
So
sure.
you co-wrote a book on CDP. Let me introduce you to the other name on the book, Chris O'Hara. Chris is the head of global product marketing and solutions for customer data solutions for SAP, and the co-author of that great book. Thanks for joining us, Chris.
Thanks, Brent. Thanks, Paul. Good to see you guys. Hey, Marty,
Hey.
co-author.
Hey.
This is really exciting. I haven't seen this many CDP people in the same place. Ever, maybe. So
Sounds like
I'm
you're getting ready to tell us a joke.
A bar joke. A bar joke. I know it.
No, the not safe for work one, but we'll save that for the green room. But no, this was exciting. Like, my journey to CDP was pretty interesting. So I worked for Crux, which was a data management platform, so mostly concerned with similar things to the CDP, identifying and unifying a profile around the pseudonymous customer, and we did a pretty good job of that. And then Salesforce acquired us. And then, while I was at Salesforce, I tried to figure out how to connect cookies to emails and make marketing better that way. And along the way, which is when I started to work with Marty, we were deep into this, CDP thing. What is it? Should we build one? Should we buy one? We ended up building a really good one and putting it into market. And then, 2 months ago, joined SAP. And I joined because I'm excited about an idea, and when I kind of look at where we are in the historical timeline of CDP, I agree with Marty. We're very, very, very early, first, second inning. This thing's going to evolve. I agree with Neha. I mean, the scope creep when you get into these CDP conversations is epic. Like, are we replacing an MDM? What do I do with Snowflake? How do I put the data? Who owns the data? What's the governance? And I actually agree very much with Des that the trajectory we're on is very much into what we could think about as this enterprise application. So I think we're coming out, or maybe still kind of in the marketing era of CDP, where it's mostly the CMO is the buyer. We're talking about personalization in different channels and activating the top of the funnel and figuring out who customers are, getting better insights to drive advertising and engagement. I think we're moving very much into the CRM era where, no, it's not just marketing, it's sales, service, commerce, maybe even an impact on analytics. But why I was excited to join SAP is I think we will eventually go to this place where it's a more enterprise edition of the CDP. Maybe I hesitate to call it the ERP era, but it's definitely more of an enterprise thing. Like, in other words, there's all this back-end stuff happening in businesses, right? There's manufacturing, the supply chain, financial ledger data, how people manage their business plans, HR, everything else. Obviously, these are all things SAP is good at. So, I'm a little biased there, but I do think, is there a way to bring the back end of business towards the front end of engagement, such that what's happening actually in the business can be really directed or connected rather through a steel thread to what happens on the front end of engagement. So there's just so many opportunities, and we're so early in the game, and use cases to think about. So it's really exciting times.
Hey, before David jumps in, there's been so much talk of Godfathers. I just want to point to a comment. Wait a minute. Yeah, from Jen Douglas. There is a queen in the house, folks. So we do have that covered. Jen, thank you for shouting that out. We appreciate it.
I'll be the godmother.
All right.
How about that?
It's a good title. Works.
Oh, David, you're on mute, by the way.
He's pretending to be on mute.
That's right. Just pretending. That didn't happen. So, well, very interesting set of perspectives here. Almost everyone said the scope is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and we can make it, maybe it's confused data platform, maybe it becomes complex data platform, maybe it becomes comprehensive data platform. I see a lot of future acronyms that we can evolve CDP, because I think at least half of you said there's more here than just customer data. And honestly, that worries me.
Yeah.
Because then how is it different from every other data store that we have? And there's enough confusion, heaven knows, about what these things do, that if we keep expanding the scope of it, does it truly become just meaningless? And we don't even talk about data meshes and data fabrics, and there was a great article that somebody wrote explaining the difference between the two, which I totally didn't understand. But there is a difference. Just trust me. Trust the author.
Yeah, I think the difference, I think where we typically draw the line in discussions with customers, because right, David, we go into a lot of enterprises, and as Chris said, they've got Snowflake or they've got data lakes, and well, we've already got all of our customer data together in a data lake. Why do we need this? I think the difference is the CDP is allowing for that customer engagement, right? Well, it's great you've got the data in a data lake, and you're right, that's for analytics, and a lot of your analytics can be performed if you have that data lake. But we distinguish, Unity is more like, well, you're going to do some kind of engagement around that. You've modeled the type of buyers in your retail stores by however you segment your buyers, and you're going to use that. Your marketing team is going to use that to influence their campaigns. So I agree with you. It's like there's business analytics systems, and there's CDP, which is can be used for analytics, but it's really the distinguishing thing is can you drive engagement from it?
Well, Dave, your original definition, David, I think I'm trying to remember, but you included it was a tool designed for use, and it's supposed to be usable by someone on the business side. So it's packaged software, and it's got to be usable, and it's a tool designed for a certain set of use cases. And if you have an MDM, you're not going to have a marketing team log into the MDM and create a campaign for email or social advertising. It's not a useful tool for that. It should be linked. It should be linked to that profile. But sorry,
it's like some marketers say, we can get customer data, and we don't have to go to IT and wait 6 weeks to get it to run the campaign.
That's the beauty of it. If I want to run a segment and run a fast count, drag and drop segmentation was our main use case. That was sort of like, let me just drag the attributes on the left over to the right and figure out how many people I have in this audience, and is it even worth it to do a campaign?
But I think that's where it gets confusing as well. So just to hear, right? Like it gets very confusing, and we at Microsoft have both. And so to your point, Des, on the Oracle side, there are certain traditional vendors that were born and bought up. We grew up through data platforms. Let's be honest. Right? Before I was customer experience lead, I was the data platform lead. So it's like very close to my heart. We grew up in data warehouses. And then came the concept of logical data warehouse. Now, all logical data warehouse and data warehouses and all for the purpose of analytics, but you need a business architect, you need a data scientist, you need a data architect. And exposing that to the business groups is just too much. And so this is why I think we should, as experts, we should stay true to customer data platform. And it does come together. It has to be part of the data strategy, absolutely. But this plug and play aspect of Martin, what you're talking about, is absolutely critical, right? Because even as a CDO, a chief data officer, or a CIO, my return on investment is so much better if I create a purposeful built warehouse or analytics application for them to go play in their own sandbox, when I can take my very expensive resources and get them to work on analytics, which is enterprise analytics, which is different. So I think there is a place for them to sit together, but we have to make sure that it is more in the customer experience area, right? To everybody's thing that was said here. It started with marketing, but sales is a critical aspect, right? 87% of customers do their own research. If that data goes to the seller, so that the seller, when they're talking to the customer, is not doing a cold call, because they actually have all the information about the customer through a CDP, that makes that engagement so much more, we call it personalized, but it sort of makes it meaningful. And so I think you go into sales, you of course go into service. A lot was said about retail and all. I think there's a way we can bring this together, but not get into enterprise analytics.
Well, I think you bring in a great point, and it kind of begs the conversation around sort of headless versus, packaged solutions. And
yep.
where you get into it is I think there are a lot of CDPs out there that are, as we say, democratizing access to data by building this beautiful UI, and I don't have to talk to the IT guy, and I can pull all the people in Service Cloud who have an open ticket and suppress them in marketing. But that's someone doing it manually. And I think there are if we look at how mParticle has pivoted and what Twilio Segment's doing, where they have more of an API-led headless solution where you can kind of package this functionality themselves. That approach lends itself more to CDP is just this great data abstraction layer that contains the profile, does the unified data model, provisions the data to different surface areas where it can be actioned. That's very interesting too. So when I think of CDP, I'm not just thinking of this is the place the business user goes in to build the segment or click to activate an email. I'm thinking about okay, the signal I'm going to put into, a commerce application is not just around the lifetime value of a customer because they have a lot of loyalty points, But maybe it digs into the back end and said, this person like returns 9 out of the 10 items she buys at retail. She's actually very unprofitable. And I'm putting that together through supply chain and financial ledger data. And maybe that just becomes the next best offer, or an action gets triggered in another system. No one's logging into anything. I'm putting that data into the endpoint it's required to be in to create an activity or an action. And it's almost like invisible CDP. So there are two kind of approaches, and I think they're both very valid. So it'd be interesting to talk about.
And I think one of the focuses we haven't talked about, because of customer data, the privacy and the regulations and who's managing this is why you have to keep them separate. They are definitely two separate components, and how you're engaging. And with customer data platforms, you're engaging in real time, you're engaging at the moment, and you have to be able to know and have governance around that. And so disconnecting, I think, the marketers from the data and enabling them to do things, there has to be a way to connect it together. Otherwise, what you're doing is you're putting yourself in risk. And this is why these point solutions will create problems, because what you're doing is you're arming the marketers with tools that allow them to do things in the hopes that they've actually enabled the back end properly with the compliance and the privacy aspect of it. And so this is where you have to connect, make sure you're coordinating the teams within the organization, because it's accelerating so fast and there's so many changes happening. You have to keep coordinated, or else you just bring in more risk.
But so you bring up a really interesting point. And so I worry that now CDP is getting into consent management, right? Like we started to see that filtration already happen, but consent management needs to sit outside, because to your point, there are like consent, it has to be consent enabled, right? So consent needs to flow, because in customer experience facing roles, and I love the way you said it, Chris, right? It's actually broader. This is why I keep going back to, like, my pet peeve, like I'll say this out loud, and my team knows it because they hear it from me every day, is like, we've got to move beyond marketing. Yes, marketing was important, and it started with marketing, but you really have to connect that customer experience. And for customer experience, it's the life cycle of customers. So sales, service, marketing, like you have to like continue on that journey. That's where the customer data comes in. But to your point, consent needs to flow through. And so consent needs to sit a little outside, and that's why you have consent management solutions now. But it needs to flow through, then it flows all the way to the end. Because otherwise, you're not allowing consent to flow through. It has to be held, retained, and preserved, and then it flows through the entire business life cycle.
Yeah, I agree with Neha. I mean, obviously we have, like our CDP was born out of the the product team at Gigya. So we have a great CIAM and enterprise consent and preference management solution. But that indeed does have to sit alongside the CDP and enrich the profile with like very specific channel-based consent level data, because like there's no like permission-based marketing now is not just like a cool book by Seth Godin. It's a physical requirement for the business. So you can't do CX well without consent, and that's yet another piece of the puzzle, which I think is being conflated with CDP, and maybe it shouldn't be. But
no, I agree. I mean, there's definitely this sort of creep coming in, scope creep, and consent management is an area of confusion around CDP. I think that CDP needs to be compatible with consent management. There's two incentives for at least our customers who are, concerned about solving the customer data problem. And one is regulatory compliance. As Chris said, consent is not just a nice to have or a part of customer experience anymore. There are real kind of legal implications to it. So it's beyond CDP, but CDP, if you're doing data collection through CDP, there's got to be a metadata layer. We have consent signals, and as Chris knows, within our CDP related to every piece of data that's collected and held within it. It's not the consent management platform, but it's fully compatible with it. The other thing is media activation, and Des mentioned this earlier. In the past, marketers relied on things like retargeting, cookie level retargeting, and that as that goes away, a lot of media activation can happen through this profile in the CDP, and so that's sort of an area. We're losing a signal pretty dramatically over the last couple of years. Where do we go? Where do we as marketers go? And so the point is toward first party data. So I think consent and this kind of media activation are two big inspirations for marketers wanting CDP.
Hey,
It's
John.
interesting that you guys have kind of shied away and just in the flow of the discussion from the very broad thing of, it has product management data in it. And you've narrowed the scope a bit back to customer data, but now you're sort of extending it into more activation and engagement and other things that are not just storing and managing the data, perhaps back to the headless comment. We'll stick with headless. Because that's the other debate that you have is, well, how far does it go? Is it really an engagement tool, or is engagement an essential feature of a CDP, or is it something that I can add on or not add on, but that's not the essence of CDP? I mean, to me personally, the CDP really is just about building the profiles, and then, there are lots of engagement tools, and some CDPs, in fact, most CDPs have those tools, but that's sort of an auxiliary kind of feature. It's not a core feature, which again is not the way most of these systems are built, and that's fine because the customers want to integrate. The thing about it is, the more execution features or engagement features, or whatever you build in, the more narrow the users are of the CDP, because now it's for marketers, it's for customer service. Well, customer service people and marketers have very different kinds of tools. Right?
Yeah, but where does the intelligence live, David? Right, I think that's the question. Like, if you look at a lot of email systems built up, they built journey managers and orchestration tools and next best action things into that endpoint. And now I think we're moving into an era where the intelligence has got to sit alongside the data, right? And then those endpoints just become a receptacle where that next best action, next best offer, lifetime value score, propensity score can be appended such that the endpoint system can work better. And that's really, I don't think that's going away, really.
Yeah.
And the service and marketing users can be drawing off the same unified profile.
Yeah.
It can be the same kind of organized data structures, and it should be, ideally. It isn't necessarily today, but
I mean, that's the point. You're consolidating the information, right? So, and the AI model can work off that data. And then the question becomes, to your point, Martin, is how does a marketer want to consume the data is very different than how a service agent wants to consume it in real time, right? As opposed to a marketer building a segment or a strategy.
Yeah, and the predictive models that you're building for service might be different than the ones you're building for marketing.
And they're different by industry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, like lifetime customer value, right? But, when we're talking about the medical industry, I'm like, do you really do lifetime customer value? Anyway.
But no, I think there is a really good point there. So the thing about activation, like why do we collect data and why do we do all this work we have to do? It is for the purpose. There's a reason for it. And in the customer experience world, the reason is for activation. And to your point, Martin, the activation in marketing looks very different than the activation in sales and the activation in service. But I do think that there is consent that needs to get collected because, and to your point, like every one of those departments, there's legal issues and privacy issues. So consent gets collected, but then you have this data layer that can be done in a unified manner for both B2C and B2B. We haven't even touched upon B2C and B2B because that adds a level of complexity. And then you sort of say, okay, now I need to activate it. Now, to your point, like this is where headless or not headless comes in, and we all have our strengths, right? Like SAP has their strengths, and Oracle, and everybody has their strengths. And so from our strength perspective, it's good to have it integrated into the activation engine because it makes it easier for that end user. But if not, like you also need to make it loose and flexible enough so that it can be integrated into other activation engines, right? So we will all have our starting points, but I think the beauty of a CDP is that it can activate multiple and different activation engines, and these are all activation engines.
I love what Des was kind of pulling on with the industries thing, because if you think about some of the bigger companies like Salesforce, SAP, Microsoft, certainly Oracle, goes to market very much aligned towards specific industries. So when I think about like what's a CDP look like for healthcare and life sciences, right? As Des was saying, like, it's not a customer, it's a payer, right? You may not have a lifetime value score. You could have like a patient health risk score. There's HIPAA compliance. There's a whole different bunch of data objects and a data schema you need to support both an analytical view, and then the action layer of healthcare is quite different than that in marketing or even commerce. And I think we're going to see over the years that are coming up, these CDP solutions powering a number of different, very industry-specific applications. And that's cool. Like that's the way people buy tech today, right?
Well, and to build on that too, Chris, there's the B2B and B2B2C, and Neha brought this up earlier. So most, CDP started in the B2C space, and I mentioned retail. I think more than half of the RFPs that we got in the beginning were from retailers. So it was very specific to a particular industry, and some media and some consumer financial services. That's changed though, and you're seeing kind of tiered discussions now, like industries like automotive that have a B2C and a B2B component, or in financial services as well, where you have brokers, and then you have brokers who have customers, and that requires nuance around the objects, because there's an account object, and there's a consumer object, and then or person object, and it's linked to an account. And are you marketing to the account or the person? And what data do you use for the personalization messaging? And so all of that is very much within the scope of what we're working on, even though our CDP, in common with others, started in the B2C space. That's not where it's going.
Okay, so let me try to take this in sort of, it's not exactly a different direction, it's sort of a continuation of the direction, but one of the things that kind of goes to the definitional heart seems to be, and kind of goes to the more on the confusion side, seems to be how you're looking at CDPs being used. When I say that, for example, on the one hand, I've heard definitions floating here and there where they'll say, well, it's an evolution of CRM system of record from passive to active, basically, right? Active in real time. And, you can make a little bit of a case for that, but it's a little bit of a case, right? But on the other hand, I'm also hearing where CDPs and journey orchestration are literally being interchanged as if they're the same thing, and they're not. And I'd like actually John to start with this, because one of the things I saw with Treasure Data recently was that they were, all of a sudden, I happened to notice that they were starting to talk about capabilities with journey orchestration, which was striking given that they're a pure CDP play. So, but I'd like for you guys to distinguish that, or tell me it's the same thing. But I will tell you, I don't think it is. So, but I'd like to hear John's take on journey orchestration. I'll call it journey orchestration in conjunction with CDP, not the same as CDP.
Yes. Yeah. So we launched our customer journey orchestration component of the platform because as you're working with the marketers, working with the clients, they want to be able to see how do you use the data to move a customer along the funnel, and being able to do that within a CDP because you have the data to do that. Now, how you activate it again on it, you're not the activation layer, you're the intelligence layer, and you're applying that intelligence because you have all of the data together to be able to have those stages defined and then be able to enable it. So that's where we've created and built it out so that clients have that flexibility to be able to think about the journey that customers are going through and make those based on the specific need of the end functional area, whether it's marketing, service, or sales.
So, Phil, elaborate a little bit in terms of what that actually means when it comes to, I'll call it more technical capabilities, because the engines obviously are working together. But I mean, again, most people know my history with Thunderhead's long-standing, and so I had a lot to do with and I know those guys inside and out, and I know how RTIM works. I know how orchestration engines work. I mean, I've got at least a decent picture of that. How does it work in conjunction on, let's call it, a technology side a little bit with a CDP?
Well, it's embedded into all the data. So you're taking all of the actions and the activities that, as you're connecting with the omni-channel information that's coming in from all the touch points. That's why within the CDP, that's what it brings together. And so that's the customer journey orchestration aspect of it, is sitting on top of that. And it is the rules that you build to enable it to go through and automate those processes. Because like we were talking about, the activation, all the aspects of that, that's going to eventually be, I mean, CDPs are the one platform that will enable the right time, the right moment, being able to communicate with your individual consumer, not sending out batch emails. Eventually, you're going to be able to automate all that. And where is the knowledge going to sit? It's going to sit within the CDP that can build that, leveraging all the data. So the technology is really around applying the data and then the path that it's going to go on for those rules. So you have to be sitting with the marketer and the use cases that they want to define, or sitting with the service and the contact center agents to understand what is the path that you want to activate.
Well, I think there's another layer too, right? I think when we think of traditional journey orchestration, it's always been sort of very prescriptive, and the marketer is kind of sitting there saying, if this, then that, and figuring out the rules-based approach to provisioning the next experience based on an action. Kind of manual. It's getting maybe more automated over time. And then you had all these cool RTIM tools, right? Like Evergage, now Interaction Studio at Salesforce, which took a very machine learned approach, saying, hey, you can't control all this. Customers moving between channels really fast, signals are coming in. I have to maintain this real-time profile, and then use ML to say, in real time, you do this, I do that, right? But when it comes to the CDP, like, is the CDP just a layer of really interesting unified data that an RTM tool can reference to make better decisions with machine learning? Or does the CDP have to actually trigger those engagements itself with its real-time profile? And I think we're seeing different approaches to this.
But I don't you think, Chris, though, so I 100% agree. Like, where we came from is like CDP, and you guys have gone through the history of CDP, and then where journey orchestration has come from, right, which you just went through. But there are two, and they're points, like, they're trying to all solve some problem, but they're coming at it from different angles, and they're very small point based, because then we also have consent, we have identity resolution, and all of that, right, and then full analytics. But don't you think that, particularly if I think about customer experience, and I'll keep going back to this, right? Customer experience, marketing, sales, service, being able to connect the journey together. The evolution is not just, and I go back to, I think John, you were saying it, is not just being able to connect and unify the data and enrich the data, but then being able to automate the activation. Even if you don't go all the way down to the activation layer, like, I actually think if we blink 3 years from now, these two technologies will probably start coming together. They've already started coming together. It's like CDP and CJO, customer journey orchestration, need to, like, in our world at Microsoft, we're bringing them more and more together, because you have to activate that journey based on the profile. You have to activate the journey in B2B and B2C across sales, marketing, and service. That's what makes it experience. Otherwise, you're talking about 3 different departments, and I'll keep getting those coupons from T-Mobile. And I love T-Mobile, by the way, but I'll still keep getting coupons where I'm on the customer service department yelling at them because my signal just dropped, right? And so that layer, that connection, only happens through CDP and CJO together.
Well, we're like a poster child for this, yeah, as Chris knows. Sorry, Chris, I interrupted you.
No, go, Marty. I was just
because we at Salesforce we have Journey Builder, which is, and I think we're ignoring, not ignoring, but forgetting for a moment, temporary amnesia, how marketers market. And I think that marketers do 2 things. They need to plan campaigns in advance, and we also need to react. We also, on when someone shows up on the site, we've never seen them before, we have to have some kind of experience for them. And so our approach is today at Salesforce is we have the Journey Builder for the planning part of it, and it is cross-channel, so it's mostly email, but there's also messaging in there and social advertising and so on. And it can even be service. You can ping Service Cloud. And then the other thing is Interaction Studio, Chris alluded to, which is personalization platform, which is about reacting. It's all about kind of personalizing an experience in a session, with consent, and it can be an anonymous user, or it can be kind of an authenticated user. And as you said, Neha, you're exactly right. The integration of right now there are two different SKUs, two different products that are integrated. Data collected in one can be updated, in another, but they are getting closer and closer together. And where they're getting closer together is in the unified profile. So the question is, does the unified profile become in future, the kind of master brain of marketing that's making all the decisioning? Or does the decisioning happen, elsewhere on some endpoints, and the data just sits within the CDP itself? It's kind of fresh and updated. I think that it's probably a combination of both, or it's flexible enough to meet any kind of enterprise where they need to be. But they're parallel. I would say they're parallel and coupled systems, and the CDP enables Journey Builder and Interaction Studio to come together around this unified profile.
I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, right?
No.
I think there's two big dynamics. One is just the natural evolution of markets from, in general, single products to combined products, to suites or platforms or whatever. And then the market moves on, and then the market says, wait a minute, I don't want a big platform. I want best of breed. We're in this endless cycle, like skinny ties, wide ties, right? And then so that's we're in the beginning of that maturation cycle with CDPs, and I think it's great right now. I mean, there's a lot of variety and a lot of different approaches, and ultimately, it goes back to what does the customer need? And if you're a customer in small business, or a medium-sized and a small business, like you can be a $500 million company, but you don't have a lot of people in marketing, you don't have a lot of people in IT, and maybe you just want to buy an all-in-one solution. And I think what's interesting is, we're talking about sort of CDP and how do customers buy CDP, but what I've noticed also is I've noticed some like sort of next generation, marketing automation tools are just coming with in their messaging, they're just talking about like built-in CDP like features. So, if you're a Zoho or a NetSuite, you're selling into, it's like, Omniture versus, I'm aging myself by calling it Omniture.
Web Trends.
Omniture versus, Google Analytics, or at least where Google Analytics started, right? It was the tag for everyone. So, I think the right approach is you gotta, as someone said in the comments, you gotta work with the 8,000 other applications that are in-house, and the politics of what people bought and invested in, and the reality of what adds value. And hopefully you've got a flexible approach, or you're focused on a particular industry, to Chris's point earlier, or a particular buyer that has particular needs in a certain environment. And your approach, whether it's modular, built in, you're putting engagement and orchestration functionality into it, and you got to buy that, or it's modular, you can buy it or not buy it, or you're strictly the customer profile and you're going to have APIs and connectors that plug into others. We've got a lot of different approaches, and it'll be, the good news for customers is that they can find a vendor that can meet their needs.
Yeah.
All right.
The other area that's moving into the space, by the way, are cloud providers. I saw something from Google recently where they were just describing how to build your own CDP, essentially using Google services. It's manual, it's customized, but it's interesting.
Well, there's sort of like,
the bottom up. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you guys see this, but we, there are those customers that build their own, right?
Yep.
And
Yes.
you go in there and you talk about the vision and where you're going and what's coming together, and they're like, well, we've already built our own ID graph. We collect data in real time, and we've got a data lake and a data warehouse. We've got it's like, oh well, okay.
And then they call us in 6 months.
Yeah.
Well, that's
right.
that's what package software does, though.
Exactly.
That's
$10
what package
million
software productized things.
How's that going? Yeah, right. Yeah.
But Martin, I have to tell you, so That's a active dialogue, and we see that quite a bit at Microsoft because Microsoft is one of those vendors different from here where we are doing both Azure, so you can actually we can do that. So we have a lot of customers. We call them Lego blocks. Like they can actually build their own CDP because they have the data scientists and they want the all of that. And then you have this package solution, and how do you we have to do a lot of education to say, a data warehouse is not a CDP. This is why I started my comment by chaos because of confusion. Because I get into a lot of those, I internally too, and with customers, why do you want to build it? It doesn't make any sense. You do understand the amount of work, but they do, enterprises particularly, as soon as they get into logical data warehouse, they're like, yeah, we can build it on our own.
I try to say, let us take some of that headache away from you.
Yeah.
But this was the change of the job functions. You're actually displacing people, so there is going to be a disruption in everything from media buying to the technology side. Everyone wants to build what they have, and it's going to take strong change and change management to actually make some of these changes happen. And so we have to rethink. CDPs allow people to rethink how they run their businesses. And
I do want to ask the question, Paul. I'm sort of taking over for you, but I sort of saw a comment somewhere. I think I saw a research number that on an average, customers have 2.5 or 2.6 CDPs. And I always wonder about that. I want to ask, there's so many, so much IQ here. I want to ask, do you believe, what is your take on that number? Because I'm like, it just started. How can you have 2.6 CDPs in an organization?
It's definitely true. I can give you an example. I was at a big bank and I went down there. We were talking about our CDP, and they're like, oh, we already have a CDP. And they had a vendor. They actually had Action IQ in there. And then they had built another thing that was a CDP. And then they were considering bringing on a third for the orchestration kind of layer of journeys. So they would have had 3. In fact, they were using a large tag manager who's now a CDP. So that would be 4. So I think they were at 3.5. Different things that are called CDPs that were actually distinct. They were performing different functions. So it gets to my comment earlier about the theory of comparative advantage, where, even if you're not using all of the CDP, you'd be using part of it that is actually complementary to another vendor called a CDP. That's completely possible. I would be curious what David Raab thought about that. Can you have 3 CDPs in a stack?
That's right.
Well, this is why we have a very narrow definition of CDP, and what we say is CDPs build profiles. Try to keep it really simple for folks. 3 words. That's all they do. They just build the profiles. Orchestration, should orchestration be centralized? Should engagement management be centralized? Absolutely. Do you have to have that in your CDP? No, because you can go off and buy a great orchestration tool like Thunderhead came up earlier, which is not a CDP, doesn't claim to be. So if the term's going to have any meaning, you have to say this is what CDPs do, and this is what CDPs don't do, even though some CDPs are part of an integrated suite and have those features. Otherwise, it's like, oh, this is a CDP. A tag manager is a CDP. An orchestration engine is a CDP. And an access tool is a CDP. And a data store is a CDP. And they're all CDPs. CDPs for everyone. It's like, no, that doesn't mean anything anymore if you call it that. So, sometimes it feels almost like, we're just playing semantic games here. Let's not get stuck in that. But yeah, let's get stuck in semantics.
But it's kind of like what happened with CRM, David, where it started out kind of more, this is CRM Playaz. And then eventually CRM got so confused that Gartner doesn't even do a Magic Quadrant now on CRM. It's just no category.
It's everything is CRM.
Yeah.
I almost like the confusion because, when Marty and I worked together at Salesforce, I think one of the early surveys, what CDP do you use? And we were at Salesforce, obviously, said 70% of people say Salesforce is their CDP. And we haven't launched it yet. It wasn't even going to be ready for
Oracle was in there too. They were a winner.
Well, yeah, we're crushing
before you launched. Yeah.
We don't need to build one. We already have it. But what I think the real question is forgetting the nomenclature for a second. When I get into a conversation with a big enterprise around CDP and we start with use cases, their CDP to them is like a framework or a way of thinking about a problem which maybe can be solved with a packaged CDP or CDP functionality. But they're not really looking, well, maybe they're looking because everyone's buying one for a CDP. But I feel like the conversation is always like CDP is the framework for what I want to do with this unified profile and make it profitable, make it interesting, and what are the business impacts of doing so. And I think that's a great way to approach it.
I agree. Yeah, because then if you do it that way, you actually, because if it's a framework, right, and if you do it that way, then it can sit alongside the enterprise analytics, right? I'll call it the horizontal enterprise analytics because this is more vertical. So it can build, they can work together. It can sit in with consent. You're looking at identity, journey orchestration, like these all things that get wrapped around it, around that framework. So I love the way you sort of said it. And we tend to think about, at Microsoft, we tend to think about it too that way. And it's so, I was smiling when you said, they said we use Salesforce CDP and it was not even announced yet. Because that is the confusion, right? Because you can build it, right? So it is like I was able to do these things in my data warehouse, right? And so, yeah, I can sort of claim that. And so we have to get cleaner with our definitions and our frameworks.
That's always, I mean, the idea of unifying customer data isn't new, as people have said, and in fact, as far as I know, and David may correct me, nobody went into a basement and invented a CDP, and has a patent on it. I think it's this concept of unifying customer data is just sort of taken into the modern era, and solutions were pointed at it. But we're solving a problem that's been around, and so any enterprise we go into already has something. They have, or maybe a couple things. It's not like they haven't thought about this before.
Well, what changed and what really made CDP necessary was that there were more sources than there had been. Back in the day, you had, really back in the day, you had like your emails, your direct mail list. This is before email, because I'm venerable, as we pointed out earlier. And you had whatever your accounting or your account systems were for a bank, for example. But then all of a sudden you layer in email, you layer in the web, and that's when CDP really kind of was invented. And this is in the 2010, give or take a few years, where we have marketers saying, there's stuff I can't get done. I need a system that's going to pull it all together. And then a lot of those guys went off into their basements and spent 3 years building something, and then it all sort of pop up around 2013 at the same time, saying, "Oh wow, I built this cool thing. Nobody else has built it." Then they look next door. Oh, that guy was in his basement building the same thing, which is actually pretty common. We see that.
And they didn't know what to call it.
Historically, So then we say, "Okay, guys, we'll give it a name." It was real, but it was user driven. It was like this very, very strong need that the existing technologies did not solve. And that's what made it come up, because unified customer data warehouses and marketing data warehouses, we were talking about those for many, many years before CDPs, but they were much more narrow than the scope of the CDP. So let me just make one more comment about trying to put a boundary around what a CDP is. What CDPs do, what makes them special, is they share data across systems. Look at every core CDP use case. It's taking data from one system and putting it into another system that didn't have access to it. And maybe that's a simpler way of saying framework, because maybe that's what a framework is about. But that's the essence of really why you buy a CDP, is because you want to share that data. That's what CDPs give you that you couldn't get out of a CRM, because CRMs don't have all the data available. They have some data. They don't have all the data. None of these other systems, marketing automation, any of those guys, they don't have all the data in one place. That's what the CDP really did, is pull that data together and then share it out to everybody else, not just keep it for its own use. With a lot of systems that did predictive modeling or lead scoring, they didn't make the data available. If you don't make the data available, you're not a CDP.
That's a great way of thinking about it. And I think like when you start to think that way, you can say, okay, well, does this system need like a thin profile of a customer just because it has to do this one thing, or does it need a thick, fat profile with identity and consent and all these other metadata associated with it to do the thing I want it to do in here? And I think that's where the differentiation starts to come in, and how these 150 odd CDPs will start to fragment and identify themselves on how well they do analytics, or how well they do orchestration, or how well they do identity, activation, etc. Yeah, it'll be interesting.
I think the concept of N and N+1, David, you're just hitting on that, right? So if CRM, and this is where we sort of talk about, it all comes down to what the customer is trying to do. Somebody just said that, right, Rebecca, in the chat window. What are they trying to do? And truly in customer experience world, we're trying to connect the dots. We're trying to sort of retain that customer for the lifetime. And so there's the concept of N. So if you have CRM, sales, marketing, and people have different products, right? And so the different CRM systems, different products, the data that is within that app is N. And you can go so far. There's a lot you can do with that N. But if you want to connect the dots between another N and get to the N+1, then you need a CDP. Then you sort of create this data layer that sort of sits across all of these applications, particularly customer experience applications, that can then connect and provide that holistic view, which then can further get connected into an enterprise analytics data warehouse that can do the back end, that can actually extend and tell you whether something's going to be profitable or not, and keep doing that N+1. So I think it's sort of there's building blocks there.
Also, I think marketers got better at machine learning, and everyone got better at machine learning and AI, but you know, they hired up in the past 3 or 4 or 5, 6 years data science workbenches and people who were adept at building models and trying to automate it a little bit more and have automated pipelines. And what that requires is clean data. You can't have good models and complete as possible and as updated as possible. And so to drive the future of any function, including service or marketing, requires data for ML and data for AI. And that's where CDP kind of shines. So I think a lot of times the data science team, who's very well respected by CMO now, are among the chief instigators for acquiring a CDP.
Yeah,
chief
you bring up a good.
I'll say.
You bring up a good point. Where's the budget coming from? Where's the drive coming from? Because I've seen it come from the tech side, being able to manage and unify customer data. I've seen it from the media side. I came from the media and data world, and you see that the agencies you're starting to build out their first party data capabilities. But again, it's whoever controls the data. And you look at industries that don't typically have much first party data, and with the cookie deprecation, things happening in the media, pharma, CPG, they're wanting to collect all this data. Well, how do they do it, and who's going to do it, and what platform? And that's where enabling CDPs to capture that data, so they don't have to spend so much on the media side for third-party data, other data. They're starting to build up their knowledge and their resources.
I think Marty, you brought this up in the book, and I think it was a great point. Like, why did Google give away TensorFlow, which is arguably like one of the greatest sets of algorithmic
I think that was
machine
Facebook.
learning. Was it Facebook or Google? Well, TensorFlow, I think, was Google.
Someone keep us honest. Yeah. Anyway, it's open source.
Yeah, open source. Because it's not the algorithm itself that drives the intelligence. It's the amount and scale and fidelity of the data that the machine can learn against. And I think that's why we're seeing, especially from an analytics buyer, someone really desirous of getting that profile enriched and fattening the amount of profiles under management, such that they can deploy smarter models and get better at automating insights, right?
Yeah.
Wow. This has been great from my perspective, because I don't think I had to say anything in 40 minutes, which is awesome, because the conversation has been just great. Actually, the conversation on screen has been great. I don't know if you guys have been checking out the conversation in the comment section. It's been really great. Lots of commentary, insightful kind of observations, really interesting questions. Unfortunately, we can't really get to any of those because we're kind of closing in and needing to wrap up. But maybe each of you could take a minute, maybe a minute and a half, somewhere around there. Tell us what we need, what needs to be done, going forward over the next couple of years, because a lot of things that you talked about, there's still a lot of confusion. There's still a lot of people trying to guard their positions and their stakes, and all of those things keep progress not going as fast as it could. There's some serious CRM parallels going on with the growth cycle in CDP. What needs to be done to avoid some of the things that we got bogged down in with CRM, so that CDP doesn't repeat some of the mistakes? Because you can almost see it coming if some things aren't changed. Whoever wants to go first, jump in, and then everybody take a swing at it.
I'm happy to go first. First thing is, I think CRM needed a David Raab. There wasn't, as far as I know, any CRMI wherever you are, Connecticut. So I think David's absolutely right. In terms of a category definition, being as clear as possible and as consistent as possible will help. So that would help with the RFP process. In terms of the market itself, we've talked about all of the complexity that's going on, but I think that the best advice I could give, if you're out there and you're thinking of adopting a CDP, is keep focused on what you're trying to accomplish. It really is, more than any other category, it's use case driven. So what is the thing you want to do that you can't do and you're being held back by some kind of customer data issue? That will guide your selection of solution. And it might indeed be the case that you could build your own, with some tools, or one of us could help you out. But focusing on the end, kind of use case, whether it's personalization or something else, will help a lot.
Marty, before you jump in, Marty, I'm going to send you a copy of this book, CRM at the Speed of Light. Lots of good stuff in there. Lots of good definitions in here too.
Nice.
I agree with Marty. Yes, we need a better definition, and that is clear. I think that'll be helpful. My thing is more around, I think CDP can be a great start in reimagining the conversation around identity. I think especially where we're living in this marketing space right now, identity has always been this very top-down thing. Like, I buy onboarding, or I buy a cross-device identity graph, or I buy data enrichment from this company. And that's all, it's changing a lot, and it's going away with the third-party cookie. But I really would love it if our whole industry in general was more of a bottoms-up and customers controlled their preferences, their identity, and we could plug more of that into this profile, such that we go to a new place where customers are really, giving permission to brands and big companies on how they can use their data. And I think that would just be like a return to almost the good old days, where we wanted marketing and we found it interesting and not intrusive. So hopefully there's more of that gets brought into the CDP conversation.
Who's going next?
I think everybody wants to have the last word.
Do I have to pick people here?
I can
I'll
jump
try
in.
a few things. So agree with Marty, having David, setting a super clear definition. CDPs create profiles for customer profiles. That's great. Use case focused, totally agree. But, I was just writing down that, I think that, innovation is messy, right? Capitalism is messy, and it's the worst form of government except every other form of government. In other words, it's inevitable that in market formation that you're, especially for something like CDP, which is solving such a fundamental problem, and the discussion before about AI a little bit, just reminded me, well, on the one hand, we're generally selling to the marketer these days and trying to expand LOB, but then, there's also the data scientist is a big, persona, buyer, user, in terms of modifying data models and AI, or bringing their own AI models. And then IT, as was mentioned in the discussion. So, the MarTech area is so crowded and messy. yeah, I don't know. I just think it's, as I said in my opening comments, I just think this is like natural market maturation and the process. And it's not pretty, but it's the way capitalism and innovation work. And I'm more of a like let 1,000 flowers bloom and then let the customers vote with what they buy based on what they need. But over time, the market will consolidate.
Yeah, I can go next. I am with Martin. I think you start with the use case, right? And it's very much industry driven use case, and then evaluate, and I'll use some terms that were used here. Framework, right? Data structure, the data estate framework, identity, like is a big piece. From an industry perspective, I think we need to do a lot more in bringing identity, like making identity the core piece, like you were talking about, Chris. There's so much work that needs to happen there. And I think if we talked a lot about journey orchestration and CDP, but I think identity is actually more and even unique to if we can really work on that as an industry and bring that into CDP, that'll differentiate from the MDMs also. And so if you think about starting with the use case, what problem are you trying to solve? Do you have do you have the data structures inside the organization? And it's really an and statement, right? Like, do you need CDP with an MDM, CDP with a journey orchestration, CDP with the activation layer? Those things, everything fits. The puzzle comes together, but it all starts with what are you trying to solve? Because we all have something to sell, but there's no point in pushing. It starts with what as an industry, I think the identity piece is going to really separate us all out.
Yeah, I can go next. I do think the pandemic showed that the need for an oh shoot moment, right? That forces people to change, and I don't think that's going to change. But what it did show is how quickly you can accelerate that change. Yep. And we don't want people to forget they need to change. They have to continuously evolve, and don't wait to get started. I've talked to a lot of clients who said, we want to pick the right run cookies we're deprecating. We want to pick the right identity partner because we don't want to get it wrong. Mm-hmm. And this fear kept them from moving forward. Then the timeline got pushed with Google and all that, and then they took a sigh of relief. But it's still, you have to find those use cases and start acting. You need to have a platform that can enable your future vision, because it is a journey for a CDP. It's enabling a couple use cases, showing the initial value, and then over time, you bring in, it's limitless in what a CDP can do. It's up to the mind of those who are engaged. And the more dots you connect across an organization, the more value you're going to bring. And so now is the time to actually get started by evaluating CDPs. If you haven't done so, take the burden off your shoulders of building it yourself, have something that works, can connect data for you, and get started on the path. You're going to be learning a lot more from your organizations as we're seeing more in-house media buying, more in-house activity. So get started. Immediate results can come out. We see in weeks, you can see success. But again, you've got to get started. Thank you.
And we have to end, unfortunately. It's been a great conversation. And we actually ended. Oh my God, we're right on time. This is awesome. Thank you so much for the great conversation, everybody. As you will see in the comments, you sparked a lot of interesting discussion, questions, concerns. There's a lot of things in this comment section. You might want to take a look at it when you get a spare time. But thank you all once again for making this really easy on us, right, Paul?
Yeah. The best, Brent and I always figure the best thing possible is for us to protect our vocal cords. Right. And this.
Thank you, guys.
Perfect.
Thank you, guys.
You guys were wonderful, truly.
Or protect the ignorance we may have on a certain subject.
Now, if you guys happen to stick around the actual thing and watch it on LinkedIn or wherever, you'll see there's now two panels coming up to talk about what you talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. Stick around. We're not done. This panel is, but the conversation continues on. Just want to say a quick thanks and goodbye to all the panelists. We really enjoyed it. Thanks again for making time for us.
Thank you, guys.
You're not going yet,
Bravo,
David.
guys.
We got to get your final thoughts too, but we'll let them go first.
Bye, guys.
So I can talk about them behind their backs now. Huh?
Yes.
Absolutely. Let her rip, man.
No, it's great. Actually, I was like almost in tears with John's last closing statement. Maybe want to go out and like, I expected music to come up.
We could have had that if you let us know ahead of time, man.
Well, there's a CDP song we haven't discussed. I don't think I can play it for you right now. But
The CDP anthem.
Yeah, no, it is. Anyway, no, it was a really interesting discussion. I must say, it's great, and obviously super knowledgeable people. Funny about the definition, because of course I've done nothing for the last 5 years, but have the same definition of CDP. It's like, and the problem is not that there's not a definition. The problem is that there's like a dozen definitions.
At least
everybody has a definition that suits their purpose, and I think it was Des's comment about that's the way capitalism works. There's nothing wrong with that, but there's no lack of definition. And what I would have said in my summation was, honestly, if I never heard the term again, that would be okay. What I would really want is for people to understand what the components are of a complete customer data management solution. And they're all the things that they talked about. Identity resolution is part of it. Data storage is part of it. Making the right decisions, is part of it. The distribution, those are all things that you need. And I don't care if it's part of one system or a dozen systems. Just so long as you know what you need and you check all the boxes to get to your use cases, then you're going to have something that works. And if you don't check all those boxes, doesn't matter what you call it either, because you're not going to have your problem solved. So that's kind of the framework thing that I think Neha was talking a little about. But that's really what people need, and don't get hung up on the labels, because the labels you're never going to agree on a definition. You're never going to agree on the labels, just because everybody has too much self-interest in getting the world to adopt, their definition, even though mine's the right one. But
it actually is the right one.
It actually is. I know.
Right. It's not like that's you just joking. It really actually is the right one. Right.
Oh.
So
I just hope
take heed to everybody.
Yeah, I just hope that people learn from the past mistakes of the CRM pathway that we've been on, and don't make the exact same mistakes. Because unfortunately, I'm seeing these signs that it's actually doing a lot of that. So.
Well, to your point, the first big one is always everyone has a different definition.
Well, you ask 10 people their definition of almost anything, and you're going to get 12 responses.
I know.
I don't know how that works, but
it's easy when they have acronyms.
All right, David. Man, thank you for being a part of this. This is awesome. Great.
Oh, my pleasure. Really great discussion.
Would you come back on to do some other stuff with
us? Sure.
We'll let you know.
We have to check with his people.
Right. And then, or some people were talking about, I'll have my bot check with my bot check with your bot, my booking bot check with your booking bot.
That's right.
Yeah, we're getting too nerdy. Gonna have to put a hold to that one. Not doing that.
Yeah. No.
All right. David, thanks again, man. We'll be talking soon.
Good talk. Take care.
Big virtual hug.
Yeah, big virtual hug.
All right. Ready to bring the gang in?
Yeah. The PIRs coming to play.
Here we go. And it's not just 3 PIRs. I see the 4th PIR. You know who that is, right?
Yeah, but really?
Patrick.
I knew it.
Hey guys.
Hi, Rebecca and Patrick.
How are the two of you doing?
All right. And holding up the love sign, the golden smog of CRM.
The golden smog.
On and Tucker is in the house.
Yeah, so if you're doing the love sign, that means
you got to share some love. I mean,
you're in the
we're all different people.
Part of figure skating.
We're all different.
Anand, did you just skate in men's singles or something? Because you did the love sign, which they always do in Kiss and Cry.
Anytime there's people who are conversing about a topic that's controversial, you got to always start off with a little bit of love, right? So
Hey, look,
Whoa, that's
Yeah.
beautiful.
as long
man.
as we didn't have any Chris Rock, Will Smith incidents,
That's right.
I consider this all a success. And we can't do anything without bringing on Big Bob, Buffalo Bob Stutz. He's got his background.
The venerable Bob Stutz.
I didn't say that.
I can.
Okay.
The venerable Bob Stutz. Well, it depends on what age we're calling venerable. He's on the cusp.
I didn't know venerable was age
venerableness?
dependent.
Venerable age related? I didn't know that. Either.
Apparently, yeah.
I don't know
Well, the way
about
Brent uses it, this Brent's very nice way of saying
Hey.
you're old.
All right. Well,
My
I'll
name
bring
is Bennett.
Gray and
I'm
touch
not
of
in this
Gray in the next session then.
Hey, Bob, before we get going, are you happy with the new NFL rule change for overtime game?
A little late.
Little late, right?
Hey, at least you know your team was the reason for a big change.
Deserve it.
So, you know.
Oh, man. You know what? We sacrificed the Bills on the altar there, but the reality was that rule is so good. I am so happy for that rule. Oh, my God.
Are they going to call it the Bills rule?
If they do, the Bills will hate you for it.
All
Forever.
right. So, first thoughts, first impressions of what you heard. Let's go with Rebecca. Ladies first. And Patrick.
What do you think, Pete? So I noticed that we spent approximately 37 minutes, the collective we here, talking about what the definition should be of CDP. And I think that explains why 1 in 10 companies are planning on buying a CDP in the next 2 years. Because what the hell is it? And that's not a criticism for anyone on the panel. And certainly David has done some great work in putting a stake in the ground for what it means. But I think, to the point we're going back to the old challenge, which is, are we defining what the market leader wants it to be, or what market leadership wants it to be, or what the customer is actually trying to do? And I think until we can simplify down beyond the marketing story, what you're trying to solve for, or what multiple things you may be trying to solve for, then we're still going to have the sort of semantic definitional issues.
Patrick, anything to add to that, or no? Okay.
That's fun.
Well, Rebecca, if you don't mind, bring up that point that you made in the comments, because obviously you're reading a lot of people's minds about.
What comment was that?
And I don't want to steal the venerable Josh's thunder either, but it comes down to what are customers actually trying to do? Because customers will say, I've got 18 different sources of customer data within my organization. I want to pull them together, but what do I want to pull them together for? And what am I actually trying to do with that? Is this a CYA activity from a marketing perspective and from a reg perspective? Or is it about engagement with the customer? And what does that mean for me, depending on what industry I'm in?
And by the way, comments, if you put a comment in, that's a virtual dib. So sorry, Josh, you'll have to expand on Rebecca's comment. But it's an excellent point by both of you, and I hope Josh does expand on it.
He will. Bob.
Yeah.
What do you want?
Spoken like a guy that's doesn't really care. He's just being him. What did you think? How much did you catch? Did you catch anything that caught your attention?
No, I listened to the whole thing on and off, and look, I think they all missed the point at the end of the day, which is, and look, I think David's done a good job in defining the category and sort of putting some things around it, but I think everyone misses the point here. CDP is look, I think, I said this before, which is, I think CDP is just a passing phase in this whole thing at the end of the day. It's really about getting to a platform that is automated, real time, machine learning first, that allows you to have, like, data in this new world is transitory. It's not about storing data. It's about the ability to bring data in for a moment and then let it disappear. And that's what needs to happen, because customer interactions, look, data in CRM systems is outdated. It's no good. And like, you can go to any company, pull up any contact, pull up any company profile, and what you'll see is that the data is only as good as who updated it. And that person may have only been updated 4 years ago. Because the reality is that CRM systems are not used on a daily basis in companies. And look, that's just the reality at the end of the day. And I think, the way I look at CDP, and look, a lot of good comments, and some of those guys, worked with me years ago on building the CDP at Salesforce, and I will say this, is that I think there has to be a bigger vision for this thing. It's not just another way to manage customer data. I think we really got to get beyond that and stop thinking that we need another thing to manage customer data at the end of the day. We don't need something to manage customer data. We need something that drives efficient engagement with consumers and customers at the end of the day. And that's what's missing. We don't have that today. And that's why CDP had a lot of promise, but you see already the disparity of how people say, oh, consent doesn't need to be part of it. Consent should sit on the outside of it. Well, no, in this new age of privacy, consent has to be part of a CDP. It has to be core to its nature. Machine learning needs to be core to that CDP at the end of the day. Actually, if you do it right, the CDP has to start with the machine learning. All data in, all data out needs to go through the machine. Otherwise, you'll never be able to put automation in place. You'll never be able to do personalization at scale, right? Because unless you have that learning ability, which, by the way, most of the CDPs today don't have that. They don't have the intelligence in order to even do personalization at scale, to be quite honest. And CDP is more than just about marketing. It's more than just about e-commerce. To Chris O'Hare's point, right? Which, it really is about the entire enterprise, the front, the back, right? Because it's more than just, you need more than just data in the front to really be able to solve a customer's problem, right? You need data from the back as well. But that data doesn't need to be stored there. It just needs to be brought in a transitory way for that moment, for that interaction, and then it can go away again, right? The problem is we don't have a container to do that today. And that's where CDP had a lot of promise and a lot of hope.
Was that a mic drop that I heard? Because it could have been.
I think his mics are too expensive. Don't want to drop it. Definitely don't want
No, we're not dropping these mics.
No.
So how do we not make the same mistakes? I think that's the
we are. That's the problem. And you're absolutely right. Because we are making the same mistakes again with CDP. Because people are trying to make CDP into something that it shouldn't be in the first place, right? And that's look, there was this whole vision that I had at one crazy juncture, which was that you start with a CDP, you morph it into an intelligent data hub, and that intelligent data hub becomes the basis for which you build a completely brand new set of applications on, right? That because we build applications on static data today. We don't build applications on real-time data. We don't build applications on, it's all static data at the end of the day. And that's why, CDP had such promise, but I see it now going the opposite direction. I see, And look, the problem CDPs have, and I think someone brought it up in the thing, was the problem is trying to even get a CDP up and running in an enterprise is hard because of all the infighting inside of an enterprise. Oh, I don't want my data going there. No, it truly is a tough thing to do at the end of the day, which is why, by the way, and I said this on a call earlier today with a I won't mention the name.
Oh, go ahead. Nobody's listening but us.
But the whole concept of customer 360 is just a fucking myth at the end of the day. It is not reality. And anybody who thinks it's reality, it's not. It's not reality. It is so impossible to have a truly customer 360 at the end of the day. To bring the amount of data that's necessary. And look, having tried to do this, it's just not feasible at the end of the day. There is, I don't know a single enterprise today that truly has a 360 and what I would call truly knows everything about their consumers and their customers at the end of the day. And that's because just like CDP, just like the this whole customer 360 thing, things just keep, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Look, Siebel defined the whole concept of a 360 back in 1998. It's not new. We've been trying to do it for 30 years and it's still not done yet.
Skateboarding move.
All right, Bob, you should really try not to hold back anymore. Just let it out whenever you feel the need, Folks, Anand, Rebecca, Patrick, anything to add? Anything? What should vendors be doing next to not recreate what we've been through, like Bob said, like the last 20, 25 years?
That's never going to happen. I mean, it's just the nature of, well, I mean, I think the premise about customers, I like, it's always, as someone who's actually built these solutions or had to implement them, or now lately been behind the scenes, behind executives who are trying to, I'm having to navigate between what evangelists say and what vendors are telling them, right? I'm at that intersection and I'm the guy behind the scenes who's like, okay, well, let's really talk about this, right? What do you really want to do? But ultimately, one of the challenges that occurs is that everybody assumes that, all customers, can be defined similarly, right? And we are always aspiring to struggle to try to figure out how to, define what the customer is, or who the customer is, and how to, kind of give them various attributes. There's a reason why there's 8,000, studying the MarTech space, there's a reason for that. Scott Brinker once told me, and I thought it was the best analogy is, it's just as beautiful as all the stars in the sky. You can't count them all maybe, but the reason for that is because everyone tackles how they develop a relationship with their customer differently. And the way that they know themselves, right? Just because, let's say I am, I may not be as athletic as, say, somebody else, but does that, so I'm going to tackle how I do exercising differently than someone else. So not only am I trying to accomplish something differently, the way I do it is going to be done differently as well. And that's part of the reason why it's okay that there are different definitions. I mean, David and I gave David Raab I guess more of a lecture than or not a lecture, but more of a soapbox conversation, because I was I had just finished, our company was acquired, and our consultative practice was about marketing and sales alignment. And 99 times out of 100, I could almost truly say that was, combining the silos of the data. And it wasn't about the data. It was about how you develop the relationships with your customers. So if you're not even doing that well, it doesn't matter how much intelligence or AI or clean data or data layers you have. The challenge is that the way that people leverage that technology is a is sort of the foundation for a lot of these things. We hope the tools can give us some structure. It can give us some discipline. It perhaps can even enable us or magnify us. But as I always say, technology always magnifies the people, processes, and data behind an organization. And this is the same thing. Now, what I love about CDPs, and I think Thomas may have mentioned it a little bit as well, is that it might have been one of those things where you have something so big in front of you that you have to invent something and then everybody gets attracted to it in order to change the mindset of how people think about data and intelligence and intelligently developing relationships, intelligently collaborating internally about it. For me, it's not about the data and it's not about the end customer so much as it is about how the brand engages and develops those intelligent relationships and intelligently collaborates with each other. I think there's a middle layer there that I think a lot of people forget. And I think that's where if you don't solve that challenge, then everything else becomes a tool that is whiplashed in and you end up with such a cluster as a result of it. So I'm okay with the chaos. I think everybody has to be okay with the chaos. That's not the issue. The issue is not the issue about how many tools or what, how many vendors there are or, the way that they're defined. It's about back to really fundamentally understanding how you want to develop those relationships and intelligently do so differently than, maybe somebody else. That is the differentiator more than anything else.
Yeah, the problem is, and you're right, and I come back to Brent's point, which is it's going down the same path, which is you have all these different vendors selling this promise and this freaking dream,
as they should,
of CDP, which is what they're going to do, but it's the same problem that happened with CRM. Everybody sold the promise of CRM,
right? But
the reality was it was never delivered at the end of the day. And now you see what happened, right? Then there was a lot of, backlash in the whole industry, right? The CRM industry went through a huge backlash and, it took a lot of years to recover from that. And then, and I do think that this whole, because you hear people all the time, right? They talk about, and now Salesforce uses, customer 360. What they really talk about is the CDP that they have, right? Plus this, this transport mechanism around all these things, right? But the reality is, right? The chaos is good. I absolutely agree with you. And hopefully out of this chaos, someone will find the right path forward, because I think that's what we hope for at the end of the day, right? Is that, Microsoft is very interesting because, they've had a CDP longer than anybody. What people don't realize is that CDP was built in 2015, 2016. And Jujhar Singh is the guy who, I sat with him while he drew it on a piece of paper and came up with this whole thing about, the universe was filled with signals that needed to be collected. And if you collect those signals and you apply them the right way, what you get to is an engagement platform that can surpass anything that's in the market. And he was absolutely right about that, but nobody believed it. I can tell you, even today, the big software companies are building CDPs only because they think they need to have it.
And they're having to have it. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rebecca, please.
I was going to say, to Bob's point, this is not about the technology. We can get better, faster, cheaper, more intelligent.
That's right.
This is about the culture.
It's
this
culture.
is about just how do I treat my customer and how do I interact with my customer, but how do I feel about Bob having all my data?
That is actually it at the end of the day, right? It is culture.
And part of that culture also is how the employees are, or the team is engaging with those customers, because if they know what they need to do, then it can override all the fallacies of technology, right? If they're empowered and enabled to do that. I'll give a quick story, and I know we need to run in a little bit, but I just told Brent about this not too long ago. I was helping a company evaluate 3 enterprise B2b vendors. And in a well-informed buyer-centric buyer world, right? All the buyers knew everything about all the vendors. There wasn't anything surprising. It really came down to price. And not to say that it was commoditized, like they understood the various values and the challenges between them. So it really came down to Who could give us a straightforward, not kludgy process of needing 50 different approvals from internally from the vendor, who has to run it up the chain to get these things. It's almost like buying a used car, type of thing. Who can give us the best, straightforward, clearest answer? And 48 hours, right? There was a $1.2 million deal signed just from the fact that they already knew what they needed to do. There was barely a sales process, but those people, the people that responded, the winner was able to be enabled to respond. And they were well informed, and they had, people are already informed on, or should be informed on both ends of that spectrum. So agree to that culture point, very much so. And one quick other thing too is that, to what Rebecca and Josh will say, and to some other people who commented about this as well, about the customer, Neha, is the only one I think of all of them that really mentioned something from a customer's perspective. A lot of times these implementations don't really change the way that they're interacting with the customer. It's a lot of the same thing, but internally they're trying to do things maybe more effectively, efficiently, or making up for some stuff. So that use case conversation, that David certainly impresses upon, and as well as everybody else, is so important. What do you want the customer to feel, or how do they should they see the change at the end, and then work your way backwards? It's hard. It's going to be hard. It's going to take some time, but that's the only way you could truly justify such an investment, especially if you're talking about beyond marketing and you're talking about the scary word of digital transformation.
So basically what usually I'm a fount of sunny optimism and glass 3/4 full. But what I'm basically hearing is in the last 25 years, no one's figured out anything. Right?
No, we figured out that we are always going to be figuring it out.
Which is great, except but that sort of goes
that,
to the destination, not the journey, not the destination. You do have to get to the destination at some point, right? If I have to go to the bathroom, I don't want to be on the journey when I'm going to the bathroom.
Well, you can only be the best version of yourself, right?
True, but we're dealing with 7.5 billion people that way, right? So, which is, of course,
well, I'm not talking about the
one.
people. It's
but
how you interact with those people. You're trying to be the best version of yourself.
I'm also looking at it from every standpoint. The vendors are pushing what they push, and to Bob's point, they're gonna, and that's because that's who they are and what they do. It's what a business is doing anyway. And then the customers are saying, "Of course, I buy into it," and then they don't, right? So, we saw again, CRM adoption was always the biggest issue, and it was always the biggest issue. It's like when Bob developed Siebel Contact Center Industries, whatever. Siebel Contact Center was a great call center was a great product, right? It was a great technical product. People still use it, right? Here 25, 28 years later. But the reality is, you have 1.5 million people say, yeah, I'm really interested in this. I say, wait a minute. Do you mean I'm not doing this way? I'm not doing this. Why do I want to change the way I'm doing anything? I like the way I'm doing stuff, right? And a lot of people lose their jobs. A lot of people, different things happen, but the resulting effect is CRM doesn't achieve the promise that we all hoped 25 years it would achieve. CDPs still don't have, I still think David's definition, given it was David's invention, is the definition we should sort of take a look at here. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we still don't have a clear agreement on a definition. After how many, 5 years now? And yes, welcome chaos, but out of chaos comes order, which leads to more chaos, right? And we have to, at some point, solve a problem that's posed in front of us, get to an outcome that we need to get to get to a goal, right? We have to get there. This is why people do playbooks and why they do best practices, why they do all these things.
But Paul, the flaw in this whole thing is really simple at the end of the day, because for the last 30 years, we've been trying to convince people that software can manage relationships.
Oh, and I don't think that, and you don't think that either.
No, it's absolutely true, though. Look, it's in the name itself.
I'm saying, yeah, but you, me, Rebecca, Anand, Brent, none of us think that way.
Yeah, we don't have applications to sell.
But it has been this has been the vendor quest, which is to sell people into believing,
and they do,
that software can manage your relationship with your customers, and the reality
that.
is that's not true at the end of the day.
I agree. It's a complete falsehood, but at the same time, a lot of customers do go and believe that at some point, and our actual job is to convince them not to believe that. Right. So that you want to create the sort of the right chaos.
Right.
There's a certain amount of chaos there's judgment attached to chaos.
I think the real question is I think one of the biggest questions, not necessarily the real question is, are you better off than you were before? Because I mean, if I wanted to become, a football superstar, that's probably not going to happen potentially, but it's something I may want to aspire to. Am I doing something every day or every week that helps me try to achieve that aspiration? And if I look back and we're doing better than we did before, or, we've implemented a tool and we are engaging with our customers better. It's not perfect. And we got more flaws. Then we're better off than we were before. Then I think that's progress. I don't know if the definition of success for everybody is the same. Just like the definition for how you optimally engage a customer won't be the same. Even within an organization, that will be different as well. So are you better off than you were before?
Yeah, no, and you're right. And there's metrics that a lot of companies put in place to gauge that, right? So if I can keep my churn under 15 or 20%, I'm a happy camper at the end of the day.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And so there are things like that, right?
Yep.
All right.
Okay.
Excellent.
Great conversation, as always. Rebecca, did Patrick have anything? Last thoughts before we?
Love you, Josh.
He was getting a little anxious when we were getting into the whole
I heard
heated discussion there. She was like, he was like, I don't know about that. Honored to be with all of you as always. Great discussion, great conversation so far.
As always,
take care, everybody.
Hey, Bob.
Discussion.
Bills, Rams, Super Bowl next year.
I hope so.
We're gonna do it this time because I want to beat you guys just like we beat.
The Bills did good in the trade this year, so.
Yeah,
I think the Giants did real good by taking all the Bills.
Got the coach too, huh?
Yeah, our coach is a former Bill, and so is half our team now.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, guys. We'll talk.
All right, guys.
See ya.
It was awesome as always.
Bye.
Bye, you
Bye,
two.
Patrick. Bye, Rebecca. All right, ready for our next group?
Yes, I am.
I'm just gonna cavalcade them in. There. All right.
What's up? What's up?
Oh my
Dave
God.
Smith.
Heavy hitters.
Josh Greenbaum. The bad boy of ERP himself. John Reed.
I'm glad that wasn't me, bad boy of VRP.
No.
No, good.
Do you want a title?
I can't handle that.
We can give you a title.
Cranky old man.
No.
Venerable Josh.
The venerable Josh Greenbaum. He actually does he is reaching that age limit. So
Stop. You're going to blow my cover here, man.
Guys, thanks again for joining us. Shelly Kramer was supposed to join us. She had an emergency pop up. She's okay. She just isn't able to make it with us right now. All right, folks. Dave, we'll start with you.
Yes, sir.
There's a lot of conversation that just went on over the last 2.5. What? Wait, are we at 3 hours or 2 hours? I'm losing track of time.
No,
we're at 2 hours.
It's all blurring
actually
here.
on time.
We're at 2 hours. So there's been a lot of great discussion, conversation on screen and in the comments section. Give us your first impressions of all of that just happened.
Confused now, so no, because I guess there's a lot, I guess, with the whole definition of CDP. And so to grant, I come from this whole space, from a whole different trajectory. I started from the communication collaboration background that then led into, looking at digital workplace and how do you integrate communications into different business processes and workflows. And so that's how I backed into, sales, marketing, and things like that. And so what I began to see, obviously with all the discussion was, there was the whole, confusion around definitions. But I think if we back up and I was reading some of the comments and I love some of the pithy, comments and so forth. The comments are actually great. that was the real show. The comments are the real show. And so, but I love the whole concept. How do you sort of back up and think about this stuff from the customer standpoint, right? And then to me, I think there's sort of a couple layers of the customer. Right? There's obviously the CDP vendors themselves who are promoting this stuff, and they're going to define how they're going to define it. But then what's the user of the CDP platform? What's their vision? And then how does that align with the actual customers, vision as well too? And how do you orchestrate, those different, visions and journeys and what have you? So, but great discussion. I mean, I love the event so far, and I love the comments and the insights. I'm learning a lot. So I sort of changed my definition like 5 times already.
So before we jump to Josh and John, Dave, we had you on, I think it was last year, one of the Roundtable conversation post-game shows, but just for folks who haven't heard from you since then, although I hope you have, but can you tell them about inflow analysis and everything you do?
Sure. So David Mario Smith, formerly I used to work at Gartner, so I think I saw Esteban in the comments there, former colleague. He and I and a lot of the Gartner were responsible for, I guess, some of the acronym and alphabet soup and definition confusion as well too. So I do bear responsibility for some of this throughout the years. But it's former Gartner. I now work with Inflow Analysis, founded that organization, covering mainly digital workplace strategies and actually looking at both the employee and customer experience and how that sort of works and flows together and how it does not.
Nice. And see, he named his company Inflow Analysis because he's a pretty good rapper too. He got a nice flow.
Thank you, brother.
There it is.
Should I beatbox right now?
No, that's okay. Don't give it all. Don't give it all.
Yet.
No, because Josh was going to do a little beatboxing himself.
But. Oh, there we go.
Don't ask me to sing. It's always a mistake.
All right.
And John,
start singing now. What you thought?
What do you want when you gotta have something and it's gotta be sweet?
Oh my God!
It's gotta be good and it's gotta be a lot, and you only have a dime. Now I sing that because that's the customer speaking. Ding! Oh, thank you. And the customer was so absent in this whole discussion. Completely, egregiously, unbelievably. So I'm going to do this real fast because I know John's got other stuff to say. I've had 2 experiences recently that bear mentioning in terms of customer data. One was that Intuit asked me to actually create a user account so they can track me in their CDP, I'm sure, in order to get a 1099. I think that's actually probably illegal, but there is no other way to get a 1099 from a vendor, from a client of mine, via their platform without actually creating a user account. So, I mean, I actually contact the vendor. They send it to me directly, but this is like, as a customer, like, why are you doing this to me to have my data? No, thank you. Similarly, just had this with HP. I have now a new printer from HP. I have to have a user account logged on and live. So it means I have to have a live internet connection in order to use my printer, believe it or not.
Wow.
And that's a data flow, data privacy, data thing that someone thinks is a good idea because they're going to do customer 360 isn't even the term. It's customer periscope up my what. And why? Why is this useful to me, the customer? So I listen to this going, somebody needs to really say this. The customer just wants it sweet and wants to eat it now and only got a dime. That's all they're really thinking about. And all these marketers are here, and CDP people saying, oh, we got to have all this data. I think that needs to be flipped over. I think that's wrong. Go, John.
All right. Well, people have been here for what? Almost like two. I'm going to attempt to make it worth your while by framing this entire conversation, but I don't know if I'll succeed. But I'm going to try. And I want to point out I had a CDP fail from this show. Someone sent me a connect request 10 minutes ago saying, Brent and Paul said you were brilliant. They are so right. And that was before I came on. So that feels like a CDP problem to me. I also kind of feel like I should quit while I'm ahead. But
you're done, Brett.
Wow.
Anyhow, I was expecting to deliver some grouchiness, and I will, because the whole thing about CDP does bring out the enterprise grouch in me. I think Josh summarized some of the reasons just now, but the one thing I will say is it's not the conversations about it that bring out the grouch. It's the way vendors oversell CDP as magical solutions for problems that are very difficult. The one thing I want to say, Paul, about are we just figuring this out like CRM? Is it 25 years and we haven't figured out anything? I don't know, man. I think we figured out something because like having vendors engage in the kind of conversation they had today is big. That's huge for customers. So I'm going to give you guys kudos because getting vendors to talk like that is almost unprecedented in this industry. A lot of the vendors that I saw today, not the same people, but the same vendors, have repeatedly bashed each other's solutions in this area, both on the sales front and in keynotes in ways that are confusing and unhelpful. So I think what you did today is a good example of how things are changing in our industry, I think for the better. I hope that doesn't sound too optimistic. The other thing I would say is I do think the technology is a little better. Well, the technology is not perfect, but the user experiences are so much better right now, and the APIs are a lot better. And that means that applications can at least play a little bit nicer, and we don't waste all of our time trying to stitch crap together, which, of course, is a nightmare for this topic. So I think we do have a few things to feel positive about. But what kind of makes me grouchy is this thing around that the reality on the ground, this is just not happening. I mean, the companies we talk about that are in the lead on this thing, like Amazon and Walmart, I personally had some experiences with both these companies that showed me, like, we're nowhere on this issue of true CDPs yet and delivering that in terms of, exceptional experiences. We're not there. I think the one good thing about that is it creates a lot of opportunities, because if the best, most deep-pocketed companies in the world can't figure this out, then who can? Maybe all of
we
us
shouldn't figure it out.
Maybe we have an opportunity there, right? And I think one of the things there, Brent, when you talk about how do we get this right, how do we do it differently, I'll give you one thing, which is quick wins. Like if you can't derive some quick wins out of this technology investments that you're making, then something's wrong. This year of multi-year payoffs for projects is such a fail. And I've got some examples for you of some CDP quick wins that I can share at some point. I'm not going to do that right now. But the point is that I think they're out there. The catch is that you have to do it in the context of an overall data and platform strategy so that you don't run into the wall later. Because so many of these things, as your people pointed out, are like supply chain gets implicated. So you may have to look at supply chain data. So the point is you're going to have to build. But if you can't stack up wins, you're going to have to go home. And finally, one more point, which is this whole trust thing and I really welcome the death of the cookie and the conversation it's provoking, because right now, either the gap between white hat and black hat is so much bigger now. So you're either going to be a criminal, or maybe you're Facebook or Google, and maybe that's all the same. You can decide. But those are about the only companies that can get away with black hat crap around this stuff anymore. Everyone else has to earn the trust of customers, and I think that's a great starting point for the conversations that you've had today. So thanks so much for having them.
That was grouchy.
That was brilliant.
That was a perfect discussion.
He had a good day.
He got me
Yeah,
to
really
the
good day before
glass half full, at least back to normal.
All right. Well, maybe we're somewhere in the middle, right?
Good frame. We framed it well. So, okay. So let's take it further.
I think, John, I want to just go back to this, because I want to. How much do we really want to be successful at this, and what is the real value to to everyone? Start with the consumer, start with the user, to actually getting this right, and what does that even mean? I think, to John's point, if what Amazon thinks they've done is so pitiful in terms of what it can what we're talking about theoretically, maybe we need to stop doing this and do something else.
Well, I think what's interesting is just, and you guys may have good answers to this question, but I think you kind of just start with a different question than CDP. You start with, how do we serve our customers better, and where are we falling short? And that is the conversation that customers need to be having, right? And from there, you start to get into a conversation about data and technology, right? So can we serve our customers better with data? And if so, how? A lot of what happened earlier in this panel talking about better information doesn't necessarily lead to better decisions. I mean, I saw a commenter earlier throw the entire airline industry under the bus. every single one of them. Like, so at some point, and some of these airlines have pretty good information on their customers. So what's happening? You know,
maybe the step before the step is how do companies really understand and empathize with these folks before they try to service them. Because if you don't do that, then you're only trying to service them to get their money. And that's all right. But if you can at least empathize and do a better job of interacting with them and engaging with them in a way that matters to them, the money will come anyway, won't it?
Yeah, and that's why I think the engagement piece is important. I think we had a conversation earlier in the show where someone was talking about the engagement, trying to separate the engagement piece, from CDP. And I think it's all baked in, because how do you really get that insight, outside of the actual engagement? To your point, Brian.
And I think engagement, you sort of lose. I thought it was an interesting panel only because we really got into the weeds with technology a lot and left, as Dave just said. I think the engagement, what is really engaging, has to be not from a data standpoint, and frankly, not even from a marketer standpoint. And again, it's what engages me. That's why I sang that stupid song in the beginning. I just want something that's good to taste and eat and sweet, and I only got a dime. I don't really need, all that other stuff. I certainly don't need Amazon or anybody else to keep trying to sell me the same damn thing I just bought on every time I open up a new browser page, because they think that's called engagement.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, one thing, first of all, by the way, for those who don't know, Josh was singing the Cracker Jack song. Just in case people don't know that. But
I don't even.
And the Cracker Jack food song, because there's another couple other.
Oh, right.
I think Dolly Parton has one that we're not.
No, this was the Cracker Jack food commercial jingle.
What is this, a Beatles song or something? I'm totally lost. I have no idea what's going on.
We'll work that out.
Cracker Jacks. Yeah. Okay.
That's one of those venerable things. Got to be venerable.
Peanuts and a prize. Of course, it's venerable. That's why I sang it. He's been calling me an old man all day. I had to get there.
So I think one thing your panel really got right today, which often I've hear people get wrong with CDP, is they really framed it in terms of industry problems, which I think is crucial, right? To Josh's point around customers, and a big point is, where is your customers' pain being felt? There was a piece that my colleague Stuart Laughlin wrote on Diginomica this week about Co-op, which is this UK-based grocery thing, trying to improve their online groceries. And this is a big pandemic thing of like, will this continue after the pandemic? And one of the big problems is that when you're ordering online groceries and they don't have the crap you want, and you don't know that until the order comes, or you're getting all these last minute texts like, they don't have this, they don't have that, they don't have this. And you're like, why did I even bother? I just go to the friggin' store, right? Like, because now you're not in quarantine anymore, right? So your expectations are a little bit higher around getting the stuff you wanted. Well, Co-op, in their case, what they did is they did a bunch of back end stuff so that when you're on their site, their inventory online is always accurate. It's never wrong. And that sounds really simple. Well, none of the grocery stores in my area have that, right? Not a single one of them. So to me, that's a really good example of there is an opportunity to have a win there. And so I don't think we need to throw our arms in the air and say, well, because we can't define this properly, we can't have any wins.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, CDPs are a thing, okay? Meaning they legitimately exist, okay? And again, different versions, different approaches. Ultimately, they're all involved with taking data and doing something with it. Every last one of them. And on the one hand, so there's a common ground that people can start with. Secondly, there is, look, I mean, I had the watch list this year. I had 59 submissions. And so I'm not calling what I'm about to say a trend. I'm just going to call it a pattern. But almost every one of them, without exception, and these are the vendors, and all of the ones, with the exception of Treasure Data, all of the ones who are on today were part of these submissions. Every one of them said their fundamental mission, so to speak, well, it's more the fundamental tagline, was meeting the customers where they are. Every last one. And when I say that, I'm talking about 58 out of 59, right? So it's now the interesting thing was, because they have to prove that in the submission, how they went about proving it, right? And every one of them was almost entirely different in their approach. Not entirely, like not 100%, but I'm talking about, let's say 75% different in each case when you're talking about 59 or 58 different vendors defining what that means. Okay, that's one thing. So, I mean, I tend to, look, being an English and journalism major, I tend to be a little more sticky on definitions than most people. Like I'm a stickler for it. But that said, to John's point, I absolutely agree, given that there are some common grounds that people already agree with, whether it's a conscious agreement or just sort of, I noticed that, and as a result of that, it is kind of agreement. There's opportunity for doing things that will be successful with whatever tools you've chosen, as long as you're clear on the outcomes you're looking for and the goals you have, right? As long that, and the same old history with CRM on that point, technology was always the last thing you talked about if you were being smart, not the first. So
yeah,
you know, that doesn't change a bit, I don't think.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was what Mike Tyson always said: everyone is a plan till they get punched in the mouth, right? And this pandemic punched us all in the mouth, right? And so, to your point, Paul, is like, you know, how do we then, you know, the interest now in CDP has grown from the customer standpoint. How do vendors, you know, kind of stop vendoring, right, and sort of, you know, change course, and, you know, and to learn from this lesson.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think one of the cool things about the CDP conversation, even though I still hate the word, and that's no offense to your CDP founder earlier in the show, who's done a great job. He's done a great job defining the term. But I think one of the healthy things is to then talk about, do we really need real time at all times, and in what case do we need real time, and how does it put a stress on our systems to deliver stuff in real time and make people's lives better in real time? Because in a lot of cases, you don't totally need real time all the time. I'm sorry, you don't. And so you have to look at it from both an expense and an architecture and figure out when. And like so, for example, we published another article. This is not a pitch for our publication, just stuff I'm reading this week, was about Walgreens and how Walgreens is doing a bunch of stuff to try to improve the so-called real-time experience for customers in the store. And I think it's interesting because it could really help, or it can get you into trouble. Like I was reading about how they want to provide a lot of stuff for people after they come out of their vaccine in the store. They're going to probably rest for 10 or 15 minutes. So they're thinking, oh, how can we provide good information for people when they're sitting there in the store? Well, it's a really good question, but that's an example of where I think brands can really screw this up as well. Because it's like, if I'm recovering from a vaccine and I'm starting to feel a little woozy or a little worried about side effects, do I really want to get like coupons for like, you know, mouthwash and like bad breath and deodorant and stuff? No, I might, you know, so there's a point at which you can really cross the line there and oversell. But I think it's interesting to say, how can we serve better? And when do we need that to be in real time? And when does it not need to be in real time?
Get coupons for intracolonal antibodies.
Hey, if it's a good discount.
Yeah, exactly. Like here's your laxatives, you know, coupon.
All right, we'll step away from the laxatives there, John. But,
No, that's also a little bit fitting here, I have to say, because you know, I think, and I know we're getting to the wrap, so I'll wrap first, and then you know, I think the term itself defines its own problem. CDP, it's a platform. Platforms are things technologists invent, and marketers love, because that means that's something they can sell. And, you know, that was my comment early on, is this is the classic problem in enterprise software, trying to sell something the way you build it, not the way it wants to or needs to be consumed. And, you know, the problem of the customer, the buyer, in the middle of the night, I'm not getting what I need, isn't, they don't wake up in the morning and go, oh, God, if only I had a customer data platform. They wake up in the morning and go, why can't I have that experience online that I have when I walk into my local store or my local cafe and they, hey, Josh, what's going on? Usual today? How are the kids? That's the question the consumer is asking. Why can't I have that personalized? They're not thinking about a platform, and I'm not sure we should be calling it a platform and then assuming that's going to be the solution to the problem.
Okay.
No one called you and asked you for a CDP this week, Josh? I'm confused.
No, that's terrible.
Wow. Last thoughts, Dave.
Oh man, yeah, thanks. last thoughts. I don't have any thoughts. Nice. Just kidding. No, I think, if you look at, I guess, just looking at the whole technology space, it's nothing ever replaces anything, right? Everything just sort of evolves and builds on top of everything else. So that's why I sometimes think our definitions get so confused, because everything builds. And so we kind of, we try to figure stuff out. And, especially if you look at this pandemic, it's some external forces happen to us, transformation happens to us. So I think sometimes when we try to manipulate or manufacture transformation, we fail, because transformation literally happens to you, right? And you just have to sort of begin to adapt. So I think even with CDP, we saw, vendors realizing this transformation is happening. They didn't manufacture it and are trying to sort of control it. But I think the points being made earlier is that how do you then, with what the concept of a CDP is, how do you get back to being more customer centric, and then go from that and back into what the tool can do to help you get there?
Great. Thank you, sir. Who's left?
I'll just say real quick. I learned a ton from everyone here. Thank you. That keeps me smart. I feel smarter than I did 2 hours ago.
But so, by the way, John, do you have a show to plug?
No show to plug just yet, but my Friday afternoon show is coming back soon. So, cool. But no, I think we can talk about centering CDPs around the customer record. I think we can start with breaking down sales, marketing, and service silos, but I don't think you're ultimately going to get any kind of real result from this until you can incorporate both the employee experience and engagement, and also most importantly, supply chain and distribution and logistics. I think you're never going to get as far as you want to until you can get those things into the mix, but you probably can't tackle them all at once. And I think that's what your panelists spent about an hour debating today. So I can't fix that.
Can I add? I just want to add, every time I hear the word supply chain in a CRM discussion, I'm always reminded of the fact that all the supply chain VPs I talk to all tell me my job is to get product to a customer. They don't know what that last mile, or even necessarily that last 20 miles is. They don't even know what a customer is. They know that's their mission. And so to a certain extent, part of my thing lately is to try to get vendors to open this up and bring other voices and other experiences in here, because if all we're doing is having a bunch of marketing and salespeople talking about customer data, and we're not talking about what is actually the supply chain lead need, then we're really missing the boat. So it's not just I need that data; I need them to be engaged.
You know what?
That's
a
line of
good
business
third
engaged.
executive roundtable.
There you go.
Third.
Wow.
I have another one planned before that.
Haven't even finished this one here, and
let's just not do it today. That all I ask is let's not do it today.
I ain't singing again. I'm done singing.
Oh, really?
I can promise you, John.
I just lined up five.
We're good. All right, cool.
All right, fellas. Thanks again for being a part of another great conversation. We just like, having you around to talk to every now and again. It's a good thing.
Nice to be
here. Thanks for having us, man. I'm glad I got to be with the cool kids today, so it's cool. So thank you.
Likewise. Back at you, man.
But the word we like is kids. We like it to go.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Cool,
Cracker. We're sending Brent some Cracker Jacks because he doesn't know what we're talking about.
I can't believe he just doesn't know that one.
I know Cracker Jacks. I just didn't know the song. I'm sorry.
John,
you didn't know that either.
Dave, did you
Come on,
know
John,
that
you didn't know that song.
No,
I did not. I did not.
Neither.
That's what I'm saying.
I was going to grab the guitar.
John, did you know the song?
No, I'm sorry, dude.
We decrepit, Paul.
No, we are.
It's
our crowds.
It's a 60s song. It comes from the 60s. It's definitely 60s.
Yes, it does.
I thought it might have stayed in the 60s.
The word lip smacking
may have needed to. Thank you, Brent.
Lip smacking, finger cracking.
And they did it without a CDP. It's amazing.
Lip smacking, whip cracking, patty whacking, knick knacking, silver
alliganacking,
alliganacking,
cracking in there.
Fellas,
wasn't alliganacking?
Why not? You throw it in there.
Is there a talent?
Sounds like a rap song, though. Sounds like a rap song, actually.
It was early rap. It was like the precursor to rap.
I'm throwing it over. All right, guys. Thanks
Thank
again.
you, gentlemen.
All right, guys.
Great show.
Thanks again. You were awesome as always.
We made it. We did it.
We did. Wow. And somehow we got Cracker Jacks in there.
Yeah. Good old Josh. So what you think?
I mean, look, I actually, how would I put this? in the beginning, I was getting a little worried it was going to go to product specific discussions by each vendor, but ultimately they all came around. They all did a great job. They began discussing some genuine issues, generated an enormous amount of conversation. And the interesting thing was when when we listened post that, the vendors were probably more in agreement than the players in residence and the analysts were, right? Which was what made it amazing, right? So, because I noticed that, one of the things that you and I have done so much about and has made such a big deal of is the collegiality of the discussion, right? And it became that. At a certain point, it just became that. All five of them kind of bonded and did their thing together, and they stopped all the competitive stuff and began getting into the much more nitty-gritty meat. And I thought that was extremely helpful. I don't think ultimately it came out with a singular definition of CDP. I do think it came out with the fact that if you don't have it, and this kind of goes to John's point, if you don't have it, you still can gain from it. And that, for me personally, I learned a lot because CDP has never been one of my big areas of expertise. And of course, David did what I expected, which is to be the godfather of CDPs, right? And it was great. I loved what he became as much a panelist as he was a host. So what did you think?
Was kind of the plan without telling him that was the plan. No, I thought it was great. I thought a little apprehension in the early stages, just a tad, but it worked its way out. And I think that's the beauty of these kind of conversations. We didn't tell these folks there were no scripts. Nobody was asked, can we see what we're going to be talking about ahead of time? Totally, as we like to say, loose forms, no script, nothing. We want to have an organic conversation. We think we bring together folks that, first of all, are complete experts in the area. Some of them are responsible for actual products that's going out with some of the leading vendors. And I'm always very appreciative when we're able to bring those kind of folks together, folks like David, and also the folks who are in the comment section, bring them all together and have a meaningful discussion that doesn't start, swinging into areas that nobody really wants them to go into, comparing or competing. It really did feel like at the end of all that, it was a very good industry discussion where people were thinking more collaboratively instead of competitively. And I think that's where it spurs the conversation in the comment section when they see that group having having the kind of conversation they were having. There's a whole separate conversation, but they're connected. And I thought that was really great to see.
Yeah. Well, again, it's like the comments we got after the watch party are very similar. Thanks for bringing the community together to talk, right? And that's pretty much what we saw here. And it's not an insular community. There was a lot of the people on the comment side who I never knew. I have never publicly made. They might have been watching, but they've never publicly made comments before. And some brand new, like my buddy Patrick Van Landingham, who I mentioned. But that kind of stuff for me just makes me happy, I guess, is what it amounts to. I just really enjoy seeing people with well-defined thinking and opinions and having conversations and being back and forth and agreeing and disagreeing and
nobody getting slapped.
All of it fully integrated with the actual conversation among the panelists.
It's like a multi-level engagement conversation going on. You have the folks on screen, you have the folks watching and doing comments about stuff on the screen, and then literally there is separate conversations from what was going on the screen, but it was related to the subject matter.
Right.
So it's like
exactly
all this engagement and discussion is multi-level, very interesting. and it does. I don't think it stops once we stop the broadcast.
No.
I'm hoping it's actually, this is a nice little launching point, because I do think the big thing for me is, yeah, there's going to be chaos. There's going to be, people fighting over certain things, but I hope there's a pathway forward that is able to sidestep some of the things that CRM wasn't able to sidestep.
Right.
I don't know how that happens, and I don't think it will be ever completely able to, miss all the things that CRM didn't miss. But if we can at least have some kind of answers to some of the things that CRM couldn't answer, that at least make CDP more successful than CRM is. And I think that's needed going forward.
I absolutely agree with you. And hopefully, learn by the mistakes of your past, so to speak. And hopefully this panel helped to develop that kind of new path necessary to avoid those mistakes, or at least to get rid of the ones that now are creeping in.
All right, man, another one down.
Yep. And we're not going to tell you what it is now, but we got a great second roundtable we're planning on.
You're going to love it. Well,
you will, guaranteed.
I'm going to love it. I don't
Me
care
too.
if anybody else does.
Me too, actually. We have to say you're going to love it too, or else what's the point of us being on other than for our own sake?
Yeah, which we'd still do it anyway.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
Well, in the meantime.
But we want to meet you where you are.
Yeah, that. Whatever that means.
Nothing.
All right, I'm Brent Leary.
I'm Paul Greenberg.
We are the CRM Players, and hold on, we got to end the show right. Bye, Minnie.
See you, Minnie.